About a month ago, or at least about a month ago when this video premieres, I decided I was going to read the entire Tokyo Ghoul manga, something that I've been wanting to do for the short part of a decade now, and as you can see, there is a lot of fucking manga right in front of me, most of which is actually contained inside this box, with a nice bit of Velcro on it as well, like so. Lovely stuff. But this pile here, the 1414 bastards here, make up the original run of Tokyo Ghoul, which you would recognise if you have seen the very first season of the anime and the first episode of the second season. But this box here contained its sequel, Tokyo Ghoul Re, which coincidentally would make up season 3 of the anime. And I haven't watched that yet, and I don't intend on changing that anytime soon, but we're not talking about the anime here, we're talking about the manga. And in fact, I did 2 separate videos talking about each of these manga. That works out to be a manga each per video. Wowzers. And whilst I appreciate that people may have watched those videos already and enjoyed them, I know that some people, myself included, like it when people put together a series of reviews or whatever and smash them together into a mega blockbuster hit sort of thing. So that's what I've done with this video. I've taken both my reviews of these manga and put them together like I'm trying to create a human ghoul hybrid. So the first part of this video is going to be my review of that, the original run of Tokyo Ghoul, and the second part is going to be my review of Tokyo Ghoul Re. Wowzers. So sit back, relax if you haven't seen the video already, and if you are watching the review again, you're absolutely based goated poggers mad lads. I hope you enjoy. As I start recording this part of this presumably very long video, it is the eve of 2026, which is to say that it's the 31st of December 2025 in the year of our Lord Talos. New Year's Eve, to use layman's terms for it. And once more I am left my lonesome with my intrusive and negative thoughts. And this year it is particularly more potent, poignant, invasive than it has been in previous years. I mean, it wasn't too long ago where I actually had to phone the Samaritans because I felt suicidal. It is not too long ago when I sort of confessed to my partner just how lonely and difficult life is at the moment, because I've sort of been acting as the carer to my family once more, as Mama-law by night has been bedbound in a shitload of pain, and of course I have to care for my brother as well because he too is disabled and he needs help and support with a bunch of other things. I feel very cut off, I feel very lonely, I do not have friends to be going out celebrating the next revolution of the planet round the sun for yet another shitty year in the 2020s. I feel increasingly isolated and more nihilistic, which is all rather befitting of the subject matter of this very long video, an unpacking and a reviewing of all 14 volumes of Tokyo Ghoul, a controversial manga series because of its edge, because of its exportation, its stereotypical presentation of emo and punk and goth culture to some extent, and just having, well, far more edge than my opening monologue. The anime in which it spawned, particularly the first season, the opening theme for the first half of its anime was sort of an anthem for fucking punky edgelords within the anime fandom. And now you're probably going to be sitting there wondering just how much I was talking about was actually true, or how much of it was just exaggerated bullshit. Now, regarding Tokyo Ghoul, I picked up the anime, I want to say in 2017, maybe 2016, when I wasn't busting my nuts off with my degree, writing music for a small but very successful independent video game, otherwise known as 2 Point Hospital. And also binging fucking huge JRPGs like Nier Automata, Persona 5, Final Fantasy 15, also Chaos Child, and Tales of Berseria. I got a dissertation for my degree, by the way, so I think I was doing something right along there. Amongst all of that, I was watching a shitload of anime, and I picked up like a bundle of the first and second season. It's going to be up there for you to go and oogle at. I really enjoyed the first season. I really enjoyed the first episode of the second season. I did not enjoy the rest of it. But that first season it turns out to be very fresh in my mind still, despite the fact that it's been, well, 8 years, now going on 9 years when this video comes out, just how much of an impact that it's had on me, the violence, the visceral, and how really I kind of connect with a lot of its more edgier subject matters, how despite the lead protagonist being everything I despise in a protagonist, it's actually a very engaging one to have, and some of the twists and turns that happen within that have been so fascinating. And fun fact, this is actually my second attempt at starting this video, because this was going to have an unboxing element in that, because it came with a big old box with some loose tape, and might have been scented with lavender, which may or may not have given me an allergic reaction of some description. But just going through these gorgeous books, particularly their covers, which is going to be floating up there for you to go and Google at now, because I think there's probably a better way of demonstrating it. I mean, I could hold up this one here, but it's not really going to demonstrate like how amazing the artwork is. I mean, yeah, it is pretty cool, and for the most part, this is a very striking, almost impressionistic sort of style. I tend to throw that word around a lot when I'm talking about artwork in books. I'm not a huge art aficionado, but I do like the impressionist movement of like the early 20th century, which, as the name would imply, they're sort of paintings of landscapes that create an impression of something. So it's very dreamlike, very wispy and almost fairy tale, but not quite in your face. As I said, it creates an impression of something, of a scene or something. Like, you know that these are people, but it's sort of a dreamlike quality, good, bad, or indifferent. So since watching the anime, I have desperately tried to get my hands on the manga. My local bookstore in my town would have some, but it would be like issue 1, 5, 7, you know, that sort of thing. And if I'm going to read something, I'd much rather just read something all in one go. So I wasn't just having to jump about, spend money, hope I can find it, etc. and so forth. You know this before. We've done comic book reviews before, where we had a look at The Walking Dead, where in these big 4 volumes at about several thousand pages each, we reviewed the whole lot of it. That's going to appear up there for you. It's actually the longest video on the channel, believe it or not. So I'd much rather just go through everything all at once and own it in that form, rather than like darting about and everything. But regarding Tokyo Ghoul, once more, it was very difficult to find for one reason or another, and I knew there's like a big old box set that you can get where it's basically these books in a box. But that was always really expensive to do, and I just didn't want to spend that much money, especially if it was something that I didn't think I was going to enjoy that much, which is a bit silly really, given how much I love the anime and how much of an impression it has led on my life. How I consume media, and just how I enjoy horror as a whole, honestly. It's just adding to my love and appreciation for all things horror related. But regardless, I'm a cheapskate, so I'm going to try and save as much money as I can. So I was able to win this just before Christmas of 2025 in an eBay bid, a little sneakily, I have to say. Somebody had left a bid on there, and I just paid like £5 extra. Nobody else bid it. I paid it for like 60 quid if we're including all the shipping. So it was like 55 and then a 5 for shipping, which was a bit of a discount if I was to buy them all individually, properly, I guess. Well, not second-hand is what I mean, or the big old box set. And these arrived today, alongside another manga compilation, which is Ghost in the Shell, but I'm not going to be talking about that one here. That's going to have its own separate video, because right now I want to get stuck in all 14 of these volumes and just give my thoughts and opinions about the whole series as I go along. I'm not going to rewatch the anime, because although I don't remember characters, I have a pretty good remembrance about the things that happen in that, which is really weird, honestly, given I'd only watched it once nearly 10 years ago. I don't know how I'm going to break the video up at this point, honestly. I don't think it's going to make much sense to do it bit by bit, because I'll probably end up reading like a volume a day or something if I'm in top spirits. I may actually just divide it in like the first 7 and then the second 7, or I may do it in groups of 2. I don't really know. It depends how quickly that I'm reading these, honestly. Or if I end up just reading them all in one day, I'll just... Well, you'll see it in the title of the video. And I'll just talk about my thoughts and opinions then. But what am I want to take away from this? I'm wanting to kind of hope that it's as good as the internet says that it is. Because whenever you hear people talk about the anime, there'll always be at least one person that comes up and say, oh, you should read the manga, it's definitely better. It's nothing like the second season. And also there's a third season, like Tokyo Ghoul Re, which is based upon the manga of the same name, which is set a few years after the first lot. So what you have is like season 1 and 3 follow through the meta plot, the lore, whatever, the main story, and then the second season just doesn't do that. And weirder still, apparently the author, whose name is Suri Ishida, or however the pronunciation is, which is impressive because I read that upside down, wanted the second season to go like that, which I find a wee bit unusual, but if he was happy with it and that's what he wants to do and he had that creative control, I mean, kudos to him, but you made a fucking wrong call there, honestly. Just as a passionate fan or anything, not like I know any better, but yeah, I just really want to enjoy that, hopefully more so than I did the anime way back when. And also, it's been about 9 years. My tastes and appreciation for things have, changed and matured as well, I think. So, hopefully there's some new nuances I can find in there that can just have a lot of fun with, honestly. I decided to go with the 2 blocks of 7 format purely because I've been knocking out a manga an hour. So I'm probably going to have the entire series done in 14 hours. 14 volumes in 14 hours. Yeah, that's making its way into the YouTube title somehow, because we do love a bit of clickbait here on YouTube. But you'll know, actually, if you've been following along with me on social media and all the YouTube community posts, that I've been doing these little micro-review reaction things as I've been reading them. And if you haven't done that, you should really change that, because YouTube does not do a great job of telling my subscribers about the videos that I'm putting out like it's fucking supposed to. But the other thing is that I've really been enjoying it so far, and in terms of comparing it to the anime, we're at the end of the first season pretty much, and I'm just about to start the first episode of the second season with volume 8. And I've really been enjoying it so far, and I've been really surprised overall by how much I've been enjoying it. Not because I was expecting it to be bad or anything, because as much as I loved the first season, I kind of expected the manga to be good. I'm just surprised about some of the things that it does better than the anime, and it kind of makes me question some of the direction that the anime does in ways that I previously would have found acceptable but now find a little bit frustrating. So if you're expecting a spoiler-free review, I don't do those, so come back later or just fuck off entirely. I'm not really fussed either way, because I think it's a lot more interesting and engaging when we have a look at the product as a whole, the good, bad and different, and not shy away from any of its more problematic areas, which there aren't many. I think there are a couple, and it's purely a preference thing, but I'm also going to come in from the lens that I understand why said problematic things are in there. But to start us off, I think that we should talk about what ghouls are, because all we get in terms of a descriptor to begin with is in the first page. Ghouls have existed since time immemorial. There's a group of people that go and hunt them, called the CCG, or at least in Tokyo, Japan, which is where all of this is set. And ghouls eat flesh to survive. That's it. There isn't much of a lore dive, there isn't much of a connection to any other sort of supernatural thing out there, at least to my knowledge. There may be some more Japanese-centric things put in there, but I haven't really done any research about how this all came about. But let's be real here. The ghouls in Tokyo Ghoul are vampire stand-ins that don't have to worry about sunlight. They have red eyes. It's explained later on, much, much later on in the manga, in volume 6, which is up here, so almost halfway, we're told a bit more about how the ghouls defend themselves. I mean, we see it because they've got these different things, like these kagane things that poke out of their backs. Some of them come out of their arms, some of them come out of their shoulders, some of them comes out of the neck, the base, and it sort of loops round in a weird four-way rock, paper, scissors format about the strength over each one. So the neck, the shoulders, the back, the base, and then it goes back to the top again. Which I do not remember the names of. They've got different advantages and different weaknesses. Some are fast, some are bulky, some are not particularly good at anything, but it's a good overall sort of thing. One of them are insanely fast at healing themselves, which of course is the one that our protagonist enters in. And it's really tragic how he becomes a ghoul. Yes, he becomes one. It's not like vampires and you get bitten or eaten by one and then you come back as a vampire. The ghouls and humans are separate entities. They generally don't mix. And our lead character, Kanagi, I believe the name is. I'm probably getting the pronunciation wrong, but honestly, I don't care. If you know who I'm talking about, you know who I'm fucking talking about. He's an ordinary boy, college student, well, university student at this point. He's 18 years old at this point. There's a time jump and he becomes 19 just because it says a few months have passed. So it's not huge, but it feels like a natural progression of things. He's at this cafe, which we then find out is a cafe that's filled with ghouls, nicer ghouls that are eating humanely, i.e. they're not going around killing humans and being more animalistic with things. They're sourcing their meat from like suicide victims and like these weird coffee sugar bean things. Like apparently they can eat and drink coffee just fine. That's not really explained at this point, but that may well happen later on. So Kaneki is having like a meet up with his friend Hide, and Kaneki meets up with this girl called Rise, who they have this hobby of reading, and she tricks him and then tries to kill and eat him. She then crushed under this construction site. Kaneki passes out because he's had a lot of flesh loss, because he had a lot of flesh and blood lost. And then some doctor decides to, we need to rescue this boy, we're going to use these organs here and put him back in. And that's always been like a weird plot point for me. It's like, surely as a doctor you would know that this was a ghoul, like there's something different about their makeup or her eyes or something. So this operation happened, and it's beginning to allude as we go a bit further on that this was done deliberately. Maybe we'll find out later on like what actually happens, because the anime doesn't ever reveal this. It's all in the balance of the manga to try and tell me what's going on. But he's not a full ghoul. He is a half ghoul, and only one of his eyes turns red. And this is a part of the plot that I've never really liked. Like, I've never liked the concept of like half vampires or dampirs, or in the case of Vampire the Masquerade, like the main channel's focus, thin-blooded, like a diluted, weaker form of a vampire, monster, ghoul, fiend. Only in the fiction, half ghouls are much stronger than regular ghouls, which is a logic I don't quite understand in terms of like the biology makeup sort of thing, because the whole story is shown through Kaneki as he's trying to come to terms with him being a ghoul by rejecting it and focusing on the fact that he's a human, he's not a monster, and he sees things from both angles, like he's understanding the world of ghouls and some of the more violent ghouls that he comes across later on in the manga. But he's also, through his existence and his interactions, is showing off his more humane side of things and making people be a bit more tame. And those in the 20th ward, there are different ward sections within Tokyo. Some of them are occupied by different ghouls that are more monstrous. The 20th ward are like the more humane ones, the one I described to you in the cafe. So that is interesting, and that is explored a lot better in the manga than the anime. But I've always found like the half ghoul vampire thing and characters who become monsters who take far too long to come to terms with what they are, to the point of stubbornness, to the fact that it's making them weak and it's hurting others around them, really fucking frustrating. Yes, it's a totally understandable, humane, human reaction to things, especially from somebody who's like 18, 19 years old, who's clearly had a very sheltered life, although we find out that it's not as sheltered as it once appears to be. So it's going to take a while to get over the process, but as I said, this is moving through the process of a few months, and we don't really see him break down a little bit. Yeah, he starts defending his friends a bit more, but he doesn't have enough meat in him, he doesn't have enough power in him. It's described that the more flesh that you have in you, the more powerful that you are. You're able to use your Kagane, but we actually see later on that despite some of the earlier fiction description, eating a ghoul makes the ghoul more powerful, and there's a little exchange battle that happens later on where there's a sheer act of desperation. Tuga, I believe her name is, who I've always loved her design just because I'm a fucking edgy emo goth person. I just love her whole aesthetic and her moodiness, and the weird juxtaposition that she has in her character I feel is a bit more interesting than Kanege's, because she wants to be human, because she wants to live a life and actually feel that and actually fit in, but she knows that she's a ghoul, and there's this real sense of jealousy and envy for Kaneki, who actually has the best of both worlds. And he doesn't have to decide per se, but he does have to decide because he's a ghoul, and no one's going to treat him as a human, especially with the fact that we see through these different agents that are hunting these ghouls, that one-eyed ghouls is a thing, and we actually see some other ghouls, and one-eyed ghouls, are, as I said earlier on, are a lot more powerful and much more feared. So Kaneki is actually in a much worse position because he is seen as much more monstrous than he wants to be. And Tuga's character is a lot more interesting, I feel, because it's just portrayed a lot better. And I just prefer characters like that than the weird, coddled, innocent, oh, I don't want to do anything monstrous. But that being said, it's not as bad in the manga, partly because I came into it knowing that this was going to be a thing. But everything moves at such a breakneck pace that it really doesn't feel that it's being focused on too much. I mean, it comes up in the most inconvenient of times, and Kaneki is slowly, but perhaps too slowly for my own preferences and for the pace of the fiction, in the sense that a lot of people get killed because of his inability to accept the fact that he is a ghoul. he does begin to fight back. He does want to protect himself. He doesn't want people to get hurt. And there's some really great training montages between him and Tuga, a bit from somebody else as well. So he is wanting to try, but he's not going to use like the full extent of his power so he doesn't lose control. But of course, you would know if you've seen the anime, he does lose control. And I'm kind of aware that he really does lose the fucking plot through the manga. And he goes through different phases, which is visibly represented by his hair colour, which I will touch upon in just a moment. But in a sense, because everything moves so fast, and also with the fucking gorgeous art style that is simultaneously really clear and really messy, it feels a lot more impactful. You feel the pain that he's going through when he tries to eat meat, when he comes to the realisation that he's a ghoul because he's eating the normal food and it all tastes horrible. Every punch, every kick, every tear of flesh, every bit of emotional distraught is really felt in the chest because of how striking the art style is. And I'm really surprised that the anime went with this much more cleaner, more tame art style, probably because that's what was the in thing at the time. But yeah, it sells the action, the drama well, and certain scenes look really cool because it's all really flashy and fast and whatever. You feel the neck-breaking pace of things a lot more in such a short space of time. Sure, with an anime you could pace things out much better, although I think the anime doesn't really pace things out very well because of how long it expands things. With a manga of this length, you're not really able to do that very well. So what would usually last over the process of a few minutes ends up being a few panels of a manga. And there's a scene earlier on where you have this investigator and his mentor, who's this fucking nut who's obsessed with like the Kaganes of these ghouls in the perspective of like these quinkes or whatever they're called, because these investigators use the ghouls' weapons against them to tear them out, and they turn them into like these like spears and claws and things, these whips, and like some of them have these wings to protect themselves with. It's all really frightening stuff, just how morbid and barbaric it is, and they're presented of being the good guys in a sense, because the ghouls are clearly the invaders, but that also presents a very interesting narrative. Is it fair to be killing these people and prosecuting them because of who and what they are? They can't help being what they are. And you've noticed I just refer to the ghouls as people. That wasn't intentional. But that's the really interesting narrative here, that for a lot of this manga we're seeing these investigators being really barbaric and monstrous and being callous with their murdering. But you also see that with some of the ghouls as well, where we're ghouls, we're monsters, like what's the fucking point of being human, like trying to pretend to be something they're not, they're going to kill us anyway, and some of it are doing for the thrill of the hunt, and there's that very one famous one who's just in it to fucking torture people because he gets a bit of a rise out of it. But I love the juxtaposition of the narrative. It's one of the things I loved about the anime, that it's very clear that neither side is good, but neither side is bad either. There's this very bloody grey narrative, and I feel a bit more for the investigators a bit more, because later on in the manga you actually see a lot more of the investigators chatting to each other, because you see in the anime later on like all these new characters come in and they feel just like your standard shonen boss character who's got these improved abilities and whatnot, but you see conversations between them. You feel the plight that they're going to, like they believe they're doing the city a good service, and in a sense that they are. But they've all got different emotions, all different struggles, little nuances in their characters. It's not much, admittedly. I can't tell you any of their names or motives other than Amon, who's really henched out and he's like focused on this one ghoul who saved him, which is Kaneki, and Zuzo, who is this non-binary presenting character, male presenting, and there's a couple of people who are like blatantly transphobic towards them, and Zuzo is very pissed off by this, and they're covered in stitches, not because they've been torn up or they're hurt or anything, which is, I believe, the assumption that you're made to believe in the anime, because I don't think it ever explains it, or if it does, I've completely washed over it. It's like the part of like the tattoo art form sort of thing, like you can have like things stitched into you to make yourself look pretty or whatever your vibe you're going for. I say pretty because they show like a flower that they've got on their arm and then they tear out because they don't like it. They've got them under their eyelids, down their chest, around their fingers and their wrist sort of thing. So rather than just being presented as like a nutter in the anime and a bit kooky, which admittedly they are presented as rather kooky in the anime, there's a surprising amount of humanity with them as well, because it's just an expression of an art form rather than just being, oh, they're crazy, they've just done this to themselves sort of thing. Something else that also surprised me is the ghoul by the name of the Gourmet. A lot of these ghouls have nicknames and they all wear masks to hide their identities, and it's also an expression of the person of who they are. The Gourmet's character I had very mixed feelings of when I watched the anime, because I loved the way that he dressed, I loved the way that he spoke, but he was presented in a very perverted and homophobic way. And this is a common thing found with a lot of Japanese anime and manga, where queer characters are presented to be like these very over-the-top, overly camp, pretentious ways, and the way that they dress and they act, I feel is just a little bit crass. But honestly, it like borderlines fucking blackface gollywog sort of things, which is a controversial take, I know, given how harmful people see that sort of thing is. But I don't see enough people talking about how offensive when Japan do this with queer people. And I didn't like the character as well because there was very clear fetishistic content in there. Like, the ghoul that's within Kaneki, or at least part of him, is Rise. He then gives off the scent off her and he has her powers. And the gourmet smells her on him and he loves the scent. And then he realises that he's like a one-eyed ghoul, so he's actually a lot better, more unique, all the same. And he like dabs like something off of him with a handkerchief, goes to the bathroom, he just sniffs this handkerchief and like gets really high off the smell sort of thing, because he's wanting to find like the next meal, and he kidnaps him in a sense and has them fighting off with some other people. Now, in the anime, for some weird reason, I remember this being a fucking panty sniffer sort of thing, which made it all the more weird. And this sniffing thing is just like hammed up to the nth degree in the anime because it's supposed to be funny, a trope sort of thing. And to be fair, the sniffing of the scent off the handkerchief is kind of fetishistic of that panty sniffing thing. It's not as bad in the manga. It happens the once, which makes it more impactful. It's very clear that he's obsessed with this ghoul because he wants to eat him, because you know how unique and special that he is. But he's not as in your face. He's a bit more sinister because the writing in the manga has a bit more reservation to it, which I really appreciate it. It's unfortunately the only time we have a queer character who's presented being this over-the-top, flamboyant sort of thing, and the second instance of it I find a bit more offensive, but not as much from what I recall being in the anime at least. But just coming back to Zuzo to allow me to go forward, it's with his introduction, or their introduction, I guess, because the gender's not really specified other than the fact that clearly Zuzo is mask presenting, but Zuzo seems to be very annoyed by the whole thing in general, which is a very interesting bit of like non-binary / trans inclusion, and yet they completely fucked up with the more queer elements, or other queer elements I should say. But anyway, it's the introduction of Zuzo, and then what happens from volume 5 afterwards, that a lot of the plot begins to change. Because something that I haven't mentioned is that each of the volumes have got like a little short at the end. Some of them are a bit more jokey in presentation, but they all expand bits of the characters' backstories and like adds a bit more motion, which is actually where we see a lot more of that nuance of the different investigators. And in the middle of volume 5, there's actually a short on Rise, so we have a bit more information about where she comes from, how she took over, how she ended up in the 20th ward, because she just sort of appeared one day, and she sort of appeared in this other ward, Ward 11, and they have a different set of rules to Ward 20, and this ghoul by the name of Banjo, who then becomes the de facto leader, then takes in charge. He's in love with Rise. He, of course, finds out that she's dead, but doesn't hold anything against Kaneki over it. He actually becomes quite loyal to Kaneki about it, everything. The reason why I'm mentioning Banjo here is because I had no recollection of this character at all, because he's barely fucking mentioned in the anime. And I'm really surprised by that, because there's a lot of Kaneki's own personal development with his own humanity and ghouls, because Banjo is a little like him in the sense that he's a ghoul and he's a bit more humane. He doesn't think he's a good leader because he's not as strong as everyone. He's got a lot of fortitude, but he's not as a good fighter as anybody else. So kind of in a sense, the inverse of Kaneki in some description. And each of the manga also starts with like a nice profile of the different ghouls, and characters are going to like be starring it, as it were. So later on, when we're introduced to the ghoul of Jason, there's a little profile about his likes and whatever. But there's also an introduction profile thing to the two honcho investigators at the time, Amon and his boss, who then gets killed by a couple of ghouls, one of them a child, who ends up being really fucking powerful because they have both elements of their parents, which is a very interesting development in the ghoul lore that's not really talked about as much at the moment. It's mentioned that his weapon, like the Quinque, is actually belonging to the mother that was killed in the previous issue, which is really sick, and how much he gets a bit of a fucking buzz out of that, and just hates how they're just emulating human emotions, like they don't have any feelings or anything, they're just killing machines. They are not allowed any sentience. It's revealed that the Quinque is with her, which I'd usually complain about being spoilerish, but one, I already knew that, but two, if you read that, you get an idea about what these weapons are, and it's a real, oh my fucking god. And also it's a bit of a test to see if you've been paying attention to people's names or whatever. Again, really interesting gut punch. It just worked a lot better here than it did in the anime, despite the fact that it's actually revealing it before the punchline of like what's actually going on. So I don't know how that managed to work so well, but it does. And I know I was talking about Banjo, but I just want to mention this point regarding the Quinque's Kagane sort of things. It's described really late in the fiction about what all of those are, you know, the 4-point rock, paper, scissors thing that's going on. And you have an investigator describing that to Zuzo, who's a much lower rank than everyone else, but clearly a lot more skilled than everyone else that's there. So something's not quite right there. And I also think it's a bit weird that Zuzo is being described all this because they would have known all of this, you know, being inducted or whatever. But it's sort of treated like a, you need to be careful with these things because this is a very dangerous mission, etc. and so forth. So a bit of a recap, as it were. And I think at some point the author then realised they needed to describe what was fucking going on, just know how ghouls worked. Which is a very interesting way of delivering the information, because you'd usually get that sort of thing very early on. It's a very interesting subversion of like the established narrative telling device, that you're told what you need to know when you need to know. Like, you can see that these ghouls have got different powers. Some are fast, some are more bulky. Kaneki is really fucking good at healing himself, and his like come out of his fucking back like these like tentacle sort of things. Like, you can see that they're different, and you learn things as, you know, Kaneki, you know, this is all alien to him. He's not going to be force-fed and everything. He isn't told how all of these work, or at least not that we see anyway, but it's then told from the inspector's perspective once we've seen enough to understand things fully, rather than being given all this information at once. So it's a really effective way of doing things here. And again, just a great masterclass of storytelling, honestly. But going back to Banjo, and who forms this like semi-good relationship with Kaneki, they all get captured by these 11th Ward ghouls, or these First Ward, I can't remember what number it is now because there's a bit of crossover here. The group of ghouls known as the Aorgi Tree, again I'm probably mispronouncing that, really violent bunch, because they're looking for Risei. The overly queer one can smell on Kaneki, as like I said. They're all kidnapped and then made to do the basic work of like chopping up the meat, feeding them, you know, all that real fucking base menial stuff. And then they all decide to escape as they work out like their different like schedules of going on patrols, like going into the city, doing this, that and the other. It backfires on them. They all get kidnapped again, and this ghoul by the name of Jason, or rather the nickname is Jason because he wears a hockey mask. He originally comes from the 13th Ward, and he loves torturing people. That westernized inclusion, I think, was a really interesting choice, especially for a much wider market, because it begins to set people up about what to expect. They're very bloody, they're very violent, they've got no heart, but yet we've seen quite a lot of ghouls like that. But yet, with that bit of association, just further cements how much of a monster this character is going to be. Now, Jason, which I'm going to be referring to him as Jason here rather than the Japanese name Yamori, because that's just easier for me to remember and to pronounce correctly, claims that if Kaneki comes with him, he will let everybody else go. That's a lie, because we see that this mother and kid get killed later on within the next volume. But Kaneki sacrifices himself because it's like the noble human thing to do. But Jason just really wants to torture him because he sees that he's a one-eyed ghoul, and he really wants to break him to make him accept to who and what he is. At least that's how it's presented. I think he just wants to torture him because he hasn't tortured something like this before, and he just wants to see how far he can fucking push him. And it's this torture scene that's really famous within manga and anime spaces because of how edgy, I guess, the artwork is. Possibly in the manga, but more so in the anime, how it's presented. Like, what we see at the torture is that Jason is constantly cutting off his toes, which the anime doesn't show because it's kind of tame in that respect. It's clear that it's quite violent. It's traumatizing scene for Kaneki because you hear all the great voice acting with the screams and the pains and the begs for mercy. But you see it in the manga. You see the toes being removed, and because Kaneki's got these incredible healing capabilities, because the type of Kagane that he has via a Risei being in him in a sense, that they keep growing back at lightning speed, so they just keep coming off. As this is all happening, Jason insists that Kagane keeps counting back from 1,000 in intervals of 7, which is torture in of itself, because I can barely count back from 1,000, let alone in intervals of 7. But he does this just to keep him sane, to keep him something to focus on, to keep him some degree of groundedness. And this is alluded a little bit beforehand, because you see like these close-up of these centipedes. He drops a centipede in his ear hole just to have that run around and fuck with him, and it's like the equivalent of like a fucking fire ant like in his ear and everything else that's going on. Beats him, tortures him, forces him to choose like who should die, this ghoul mother or this ghoul child. He doesn't choose any of them. The queer partner comes in because the queer one's in a relationship with Jason. And just to pause myself for a moment, the short at the end of volume 6 does present a bit of their relationship together, and there's also a bit of that within the actual torture scene, which presents a weird level of humanity for Jason. And I didn't think I was going to be feeling for him at all, but that's just the great writing that's going on here. But because of all this lovey-dovey stuff, and I'm not doing that because the quoting, but it's because Nico, the queer one whose name I've just remembered, pops in. Don't you think this is a bit unnecessary? Don't you think that you're doing something a bit too much here? He doesn't think so, so he kills one because he's just had enough, storms off, and then Nico kills the other one out of pity. All the while, Jason is just monologuing at Kaneki, like wanting to break, wanting to see what made him become a ghoul, or maybe he's just doing it for the fucking thrill of it. But he talks about why he is the ghoul that he was, because something very similar happened to him. He was taken in by his investigator, and he was tortured by a human investigator. He fucking snapped one day, ate a couple of ghouls, which confirms properly that eating ghouls does make ghouls more powerful, as we kind of see a little bit beforehand in a scene where Toga eats a bit of Kaneki to get some strength, which makes herself momentarily much stronger, so she goes to fight against the gourmet, as the character's known. And it's very interesting, the humanity that's presented with Jason doing all of this, because it's a well-known fact that those who abuse will often abuse themselves as kids, or at whatever point in their life. Usually it's from kids to adulthood. And it's interesting that that chain wasn't broken, but it was just fed into a lot more. And it's just, again, ghouls not being human, just the weird conflict between humanity and ghoulality, for lack of a better phrase. Just how really at the end of the day there's not much difference between either of them. It's just their methods of doing things are just, well, they're not even that different from each other, honestly. It's just two sides of the same fucking coin. And the art that shows off all of this is just harrowing. And I know that I've talked a little bit about the artwork before, about how well sadness and frustration is captured, but there are moments where the characters feel surprised or shocked, and there is just a weird edge to it. And I don't mean like edgy, but I don't know how to describe it, but I really don't want to show it here, because it's something that I feel you should be experiencing for yourself, because it really does hit you different. That whole torture scene hits you different because of the visceralness of the art style and how the established structure changes. Text is all over the screen. It becomes a lot more messy. It's the format, the different panels changes. It's not so regulated. It's you feel Taneki's pain. You feel his torture. You feel him slowly fucking losing it. And even though I knew everything that was going on in there, like the breaking of the fingers, the little stim, for lack of brace thing that Jason does, the thing with the fingers, which, fun fact, this has become a stim of mine now because of that, because it just feels really fucking smoothing to do, for better and for worse, i.e. from its association. The centipede, the counting, and the anime, this is all just dragged out. And I think now in the anime it drags on a bit too much. And again, the pace that you see it in the manga is just perfect, because you don't really know how long it's going on for, because the concept of time is just lost on Kaneki now, and it's because it's happening so fast you think it's all happening all at once. No, it's being dragged out here. I don't know if I'm explaining this all very well, but the pacing in its presentation here is just so fucking sublime. And I know that the torture scene has garnered such of a reputation of just being overly edgy, overly dramatic. A lot of that's to do with like pictures and whatnot being misquoted and like becoming memes out of unnecessarily. And I say that perhaps with a bias, because I've always really liked the presentation of things. I've always seen myself as like a edgelord goth, so I would lean a bit more to those sort of more dramatic, borderline romantic things. But I always felt a bit iffy with the way that it shows Kaneki gaining his silver hair or white hair when he goes through so much trauma. It just changes. It sort of reminisces a future manga panel. He like throws his hair back and the black sort of blossoms into the white, and he's got these flowers around him because he's in his own head, talking to Rise. It's not really Rise, it's still a figment of his imagination, which is really a part of himself, like pushing him over the edge, the ghoul part of him, quite literally. And the thing that actually pushes him over the edge, both in the anime and the manga, is the fact that he's thinking about how his mum betrayed him, or he felt that his mum betrayed him because the mum placed focus on the aunt, who then looked after him and then didn't treat him very nice. And there's a very small panel, and if I can find it online, I'll put it on someone's screen, otherwise you're just going to have to cope with a bad picture that I took. And it's like talking about how increasingly the aunt became a very unpleasant person to be around because she was jealous of her sister and their son for being better, more intelligent than both her and her own son is, and the son never took school very seriously. And it's just the different meals, like a full meal, a little meal, and then money to go and buy food yourself, and the text that goes with that as well. That's just fucking harrowing. That's just grim. That's abuse. And you can only like slot into places like the other things that happen. Like, yeah, she was shouting at him and yet treated him like shit, but did she hit him? Like, did she do all these other really neglectful, abusive things out of jealousy and spite? And it's this realization that makes him fully embrace who and what he is. A ghoul, a human, that no one's really cared for him, that he's, despite his emotions on humanity has betrayed him every fucking turn of his life. On the investigators, his mother, his aunt, probably the cousin, because I imagine that would probably span some unpleasantries from like the two male siblings living to each other over time, but that's not talked upon at all. But the manga doesn't show the acceptance of him being a ghoul in this sort of almost romantic style, which I would usually applaud because, again, goth romantic individual that I am, I feel it's kind of disrespectful to fucking actual trauma survivors, that the way that it's presented, and you don't have like this rose petal thing around him. No, you just get that. Now, that's horrifying because he starts eating himself to survive. Like this recycling of ghoul flesh, as it were, because he's just sort of losing it because he's not really getting anything to eat. Another torture tactic. And it makes you wonder, does he fucking pull off his own fucking face, or is that just there for shock value? I mean, if it is, it fucking works. I can understand why the anime didn't do that. And I will admit that I had seen that image before. I didn't know the context of it. I thought that this was just one of those like out of context mean edits. I felt sick looking at that. He's gone. You really feel that he's gone. Kaneki, no matter his transformations, because I know there are bits where he becomes more mad, probably from eating other ghouls. I don't quite remember how it's presented. I think it's more explored in the second anime season, so I can't really take that as proof of like an actual progression. But he's clearly not in when he meets up with the other ghouls again, because he absolutely fucking floors Jason. Like, he gets stabbed once with like these like own Kaneki, but yeah, Kaneki now a ghoul, he completely fucking floors him. And this is the fact that Jason has eaten other ghouls. So Kaneki by himself as a half ghoul is much stronger than somebody who has eaten 2 to 3 ghouls. That is it. He ate 3 ghouls in this prison, eats these other 2 Kanekis within him, and he's now a half ghoul with like these ever parts on top of that. So, yeah, Kaneki is a really fucking powerful ghoul. And now he's not going to be holding back any punches. Or at least he does a little bit when he meets up with the group again. A bit of humanity. But he assumes himself as the leader now in a real calm, like, no offense, I'm just going to be taking over. I don't want you to have that burden. But that panel that I showed a moment ago is... I was looking at that for like a minute, just like... Fuck, I'm so sorry, kid. Like, again, 19, maybe 20, because we don't know how much time has passed since then. He's gone. Like, completely... Yeah. Which is sad and fucking horrifying at the same time. And of course, all of his other buddies from 20th Ward come and attempt to rescue him, who haven't found him yet, at the point of my reading. And they're going to be real shocked to find him, and... their boss, who's like this old man ghoul who runs this cafe, like, expect him to be dead, he says to everyone else, but he says to someone else privately, he's probably not going to be the same person. And it's very much alluding that this old man ghoul is a very powerful, very wise, who has seen a lot of shit. And it's alluded, and I can't remember if the anime confirms this, I don't think it does, that he is this very powerful ghoul known as the Owl. And it's mentioned through these investigators that There was this big event many years ago, like the owl, and they thought he was dead or he ran away or whatever, and it's implied that this old man is the owl, and now he's coming to basically fuck everyone over. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the anime adapts that, whether the anime is going to confirm that this is in fact the owl, or whether it's someone different, because the leader of the Ogi tree is this one-eyed ghoul who is called the one-eyed owl or something like that. I can't quite remember the name there. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens next. I'm very excited to see what happens next because, as I mentioned already, everything has led up to the end of the first season and the beginning of the first one now. And I know that the second season doesn't really adhere to the plot of the manga at all, so I'm entering the unknown here, and I'm just very excited to see Kaneki's downfall. Not as grim as I just made it sound, but I want to see how he handles with things now, how his friends handle things now. And just exploration of just the psychological nature of being a ghoul, and just the psychology of him coping with being a ghoul, and whether he actually does go down this rabbit hole becoming more of a monster, and if so, how, and how he has to retrain himself to be human. Yeah, there's a lot of ifs and curiosities with this, and I'm just very excited to get stuck in with Volume 8 up to 14 of Tokyo Ghoul. So I've done it. I have read all of Tokyo Ghoul. Across 2 days, I read the remaining 8. I did 3 on one day, and then 5 yesterday, which would be the 19th of January 2026 in the year of our Lord Talos. And I really enjoyed it. And like the first part, I made some notes of things I wanted to talk about. That is until I got to the last 2 to 3 volumes, where I barely wasn't writing anything because I was just so blown away and moved by what I was reading that I just kind of forgot to detach myself from what I was reading enough to write my thoughts and opinions on things. I mean, there's a couple of things here and there, but there isn't a lot because I found it all just so emotionally stirring, and there were a couple of tearjerkers in there. I'm not going to lie, I didn't quite cry. I came close, which some might think is a bit daft, like crying over a bit of fiction, but you've just got no soul if you can't be moved by art like that. And I knew what was going to happen, or had some idea of what was going to happen if the anime was any form of guidance, which turned out to be a little bit. But also, when you open up each of the volumes, as I mentioned, you've got those profiles of people. But in the last one, you've got a profile for a character known as the Eye Patch Ghoul / the Centipede, which is Kaneki. And it says at the bottom here, spoilers, eradicated by Special Investigator Arama at Underground V14 route during said operation. The operation being like this big battle at the end where a lot of the ghouls are protecting the cafe, each other, because basically every single investigator and their mother has gone to try and hunt down the owl, that big baddie that escaped 10 years ago, who we then find out isn't actually the owl proper. The owl is actually Yoshima's son, who is a offspring of a human and a ghoul, which is super fucking rare, and this ghoul just fucking hates humans and ghouls alike and just eats everything. Swallows his dad whole at one point as well, which is a pretty frightening stuff. Hi, Future Lore here. I'm just interrupting myself in this weird place because I have to get this off my mind now, otherwise it's going to feel weird if I do it later on. I have only just noticed that second portrait, the one that's above Kaneki. It's just when I opened it, I just saw that, and that's all that I just focused on, and then I just, no, he can't fucking die here. Like, why are you spoiling this now? Which, by the way, does actually make it far more impactful when you go and read and find that he has fucking died, because the wording of such implies that he escaped or got away or whatever it is, they took him on board, because I know a little bit about the setup for Tokyo Ghoul, which I'll talk about later in the video when I'm actually talking about what I think Tokyo Ghoul is going to be. That character above Kaneki is the author that he and somebody else and Rise really like. She appears at this towards the end because she's having a book signing and they go and have the certain books signed. But she then goes and speaks to the investigator Amon and drips him a little inside information about something that's happening that may be alluding to the fact that the investigators know that whole Kano thing and they may or may not be making artificial one-eyed ghouls. And there's a bit towards the end when somebody who I now realise looks like her appears and says, "Hello, Dad." There is also a ghoul that is covered in bandages who seems to know a lot of what's going on as well. I do not know if any of these are connected, but I would not be surprised if that author, who in the colour portrait you saw a moment ago had one red eye, is this one-eyed king who is orchestrating a lot more than we're being led to believe, because I did think it was very weird that this author just so happened to know this, but she's investigating ghouls, so maybe as a journalist she might have picked up on something, but having just realised what I realise now, I feel I'm just about to crack something big. I don't mention this in the video because, as I just said, I've only just noticed this now, but if I don't mention this now, anyway, I've said all of that, so anyway, I'll go back to Depressed Lore by Night. So the investigators are battling who they believe is the owl, and then another one arrives who is a far more monstrous, and they're all shitting themselves because they don't know what to do. And seeing all these different investigators and the ghouls, some of them coming out of retirement, as it were, because Yoshima has quelled their angry, violent spirits, to be more peaceful, to be more loving, to be more accepting of humans and other ghouls as well. And now they're going complete balls to the walls, defending themselves and fighting away these investigators who, similar to the anime, does have that issue of Shonen dropping these really important characters with a big final boss fight with special enhanced versions of Quinkei's we see a bit earlier on in the manga. The special investigators were above the rank 1, so the best of the best basically have this Quinkei armor that's defending them as they're fighting against these triple S rank ghouls, which is the owl and the sun. Kenkei becomes a rank 2 due to some events that I'll talk about in a moment. But basically, they're going toe-to-toe as a version of ghouls, basically using the ghouls' weapons and defensive mechanisms against, the ghouls, which sort of puts it on a weird, toxic head. Okay, so ghouls are bad, but you're using all their tools against them, so you're becoming a proto-ghoul, you're becoming as dangerous as them. Very interesting conversation ethics there. All these different ghouls fighting these apes and the dogs. Keneki's lot doesn't, for the most part. They're just off hiding, keeping away because they're not strong enough to deal with all of this. And despite the fact that you've got all these different investigators dropping in, it feels a lot more impactful here just because the pacing of everything is so much better. We see a lot during the second half of this. The thoughts and reflections and the interactions of the different investigators. You see some of these more important ones come in and have conversations, brief as that is. I did have to go back and remind myself a bit, okay, have we seen such and such before? Because there's a bit where all of them are having this big old meeting, and a couple of them do appear here. And because you also have more of that connection with the characters in the cafe, the ghouls, who then turn out being really powerful and strong themselves, you feel a lot more for the ghouls as well, but you honestly feel a lot more for the investigators. They don't just feel like this established franchise's villains on the perspective of our heroes, the ghouls, that they have lives, they have feelings, they have emotions. Towards the end of it, when they're going into this big battle in the 20th War to fight the owl and all of his associates, they all have to write these testament notes, with basically, as one person describes it, essentially a suicide notes that they're having to write to their loved ones because they may not survive this. You've got a couple who are terrified because they do not want to die. There is even a panel or two panels in one of the last ones I'll put up on the screen somewhere where this younger investigator is rank 2, so just above rank 3, so in the middle of the road sort of thing, who wants to be better, who wants to do more investigative, one wants to prove himself, but he's now thrown into the deep end with everyone else having to fight the owl. And he's writing this note to his mother. He goes to visit his mother, not saying why he's there, and he just leaves this message, which is real fucking heartbreaking and real emotionally stirring stuff. You feel for these investigators, even though they're fucking bastards, just not finding a better way of letting these ghouls survive, especially when the series is really suggesting that these ghouls have been around for ever. This is just a thing of the world. They haven't just popped out of the void sort of thing, that these individuals, these people, the civilization do exist, because there's actually conversation about somebody going to Germany to study ghouls, or they had studied in Germany for ghouls, and another ghoul, a really powerful one, had travelled the world, like mastering all the martial arts sort of thing. So it's a global thing. It's not just limited to Japan, but you feel a lot more for the investigators here, and it's just this real bleak and nihilistic output that no one's right, no one's wrong, and everyone's right and everyone's wrong. It's just fucking violence and bloodshed that hasn't really solved anything. Because at the end of it, the owl, the like bigger, more violent owl who eats his father, fucking weird sentence to say, escapes. Like, he's hunted down by like the best hunter, investigator rather, this young guy called Ariyama, who I think I mentioned earlier on is this really cool looking guy with glasses, like short, well kept hair. In the anime he's wearing like this very tight looking white jacket. He looks really cool. He reminds me a little bit of Chorus from the Pokemon games. That sort of like peak badass scientific drip. He's got 2 Quinkes, which some of the investigators do, which is like a rare special circumstance. He doesn't have like this big bulky armor some of the other investigators do. But he does have like these really fine, elegant spears that can like shapeshift. Well, it's actually 1 or 2, I can't quite remember, that shapeshift and change, and one of them like fires like electric blasts at people, and it's really rare that these Quinkes can actually like just fire energy like that. And you don't see this with any of the other ghouls other than like fine projectiles from their wings, which is the specific type of ghoul that can spout wings and are really fast and agile. But this energy blast thing is different, and Ariyama completely wipes the floor almost with the owl. I mean, he gets away, but the owl is clearly on the defensive here. And as I mentioned, Ariyama is the one that kills Kenke at the end. He has that fight over Mon, who's dead now because the 2 fought and Kenke sort of killed him. I say sort of because he was fine and not trying to kill him, because he didn't want to kill him, because he was really trying not to kill people and like lose himself to the more ghoul side of things. Doesn't work, obviously. And Kenke does manage to cut Ariyama, but again, Ariyama just completely floors him. Ariyama knows him by his name, which is an interesting thing, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment when I'm talking about Tokyo Ghoul Re. It's just sad to watch, just how at the end of it, Kenke realises just how selfish he's been. Like, he's been trying to protect people, but he's just been doing it from the selfish standpoint, like feeling he has to protect everyone, feeling that he has to do the right thing to be the fucking hero. And then you have on the other side of things Tuka, who was trying to get him to be more like a ghoul, but now is rejecting her ghoulness, I guess. Her ghoul nature, the ghoul part, well, her being a ghoul, and like trying really hard to be a human. She wants to be a human. They can't find the middle ground, so they like completely separate, and she doesn't know that he's dead. Well, probably with the time jump that happens, she'll pick up on that. But she wants to go and save everybody, and Yomo, the sort of quiet, silent sort, doesn't let her, because what's the point of it? Like, they're redeeming themselves because they're atoning for their sins. Both Yoshimo, who did kill a lot of people, because we find out about him when he's revealing that the owl is his son, or at least one of the owls of his son, because he took on the mantle of the owl himself to protect his son. He killed a lot of people, ate a lot of ghouls and people, which is why the way he looks what he does. Part of this other separate, like, shadowy organisation, implied to be the Aorigi, like the main antagonistic ghoul faction. Of like, if there's any antagonist faction, it's them and Kano, the doctor who made Kaneki a half ghoul. So all of these people are redeeming themselves, and Toko isn't. And she wants to go and help and atone for sins or whatever. She's told to grow up, like, you have an opportunity to live the life that you want to live. And Kaneki's part of that as well, because all the killing that he's done and all the horrible things that he's done throughout the latter part of the manga. But just to like completely shatter the tone for a moment, he's hot now. Like, damn, like halfway through like this 8 set, like he has a shower and he steps out, and like there's just like a quarter panel of him just like fucking ripped, and I thought, I would happily spread my Krakenade to have some of his Kakanate in. Like, damn, son, like the glow up there. And it was kind of funny just seeing how that happened, because he's training to fight this much more stronger ghoul. The one who I mentioned is like the martial artist expert who was released when Arugi invaded like this special base that was being used to house all these really dangerous ghouls. And I forgot there's a bit that's mentioned at the beginning that he learns all these different fighting styles by martial arts and just absorbing all this information from books that he's reading so he can like try and go toe to toe with him. But it doesn't work, unfortunately. Which I'm kind of glad that it doesn't, because it just shows that some limitations on Keneki's powers. Yes, he eats a lot of these other ghouls when he finds out the true nature of what he is, and the reason why that he is been acting more human is the fact that the medicine that he was taking at the beginning were these emotional suppressors. And Kano didn't just do this haphazardly, that this was deliberate. Oh, and we found out that Rize lives. It wasn't just a kidney that was removed, like he was harvesting her, and he created some other ghouls with her as well, like these twin girls, one with black hair, one with white, opposite red eyes. I love that fucking trope of anime. Like, you've got these really badass twins that don't speak all that much. It's a very fucking anime JRPG thing, and I just love that vibe. It's so fucking cool. And again, these characters, as brief as they are, have a really tragic backstory as well. They had lived in this big house, parents were killed off by ghouls, and these two were taken in by the investigators to use their anger and their revenge to make them perfect hunters, which is such a horrible fucking grooming, I guess, tactic, you know, to create the best of the best, you know, to fight against the best sort of thing. But that sort of backfired because Kano sort of took them off with them to make them into ghouls. It's not really explained properly how he managed to get away with this, but that's what happens, I guess. And there's a sibling for them as well, a character that we know as Juzo, you know, the wild killer with all the stitches and things in them. Only it turns out that Juzo isn't as much of a killer as we see. Juzo, in their youth, because they're taken in by the investigators at one point as well, is blamed for like killing animals, but actually we then find out it was an investigator. And we see with the hand gestures that it was the investigator that was torturing ghouls, and he's just killing animals. And it's just a matter of fact that Juzo's at the wrong place at the wrong time. The investigators know it was that particular investigator. It was, oh, we'll just blame Juzo. It's just the easiest thing to do, which is fucking messed up. And Juzo actually wasn't raised in the investigators like everybody else. Like, they were kidnapped by a ghoul and then raised as a ghoul as a pet animal, and was paid to put on shows and do all these really horrible acts and kill a lot of people. And it's really horrifying bit that I think a lot of people can relate to if you're trans and non-binary, and this might be a bit triggering for you, so apologies in advance. This ghoul woman is dressing him up as a girl. Juzo is very clearly a guy in this, but dresses Juzo up as a girl when, you know, she's not torturing him to make pain meaningless, to numb it out of him, because Juzo at one point has his stomach cut open and doesn't realise it until he looks down and is like, oh shit. And Juzo also loses a leg at one point as well towards the end, fighting the owl. There's a lot of limbs and people that die in that bit as well, which is, again, just showing the real fucking power of things. But going back to Juzo and the forced acceptance of a gender that doesn't quite belong to them. Juzo doesn't feel quite comfortable in dresses because, you know, identifying as a boy. The ghoul that has Juzo as a girl, it's like, oh, you're not going to look like this forever. I know what to do. Takes a mallet and just like completely squashes the dick out of existence. And officially, Juzo has no gender, which kind of puts a lot of dark context into the way that Genzo was treating people when questioning them being a boy, and the glares that they got, because that's very traumatic for them. And Juzo didn't really get the education and the upbringing they did, so their mentality and the way they just view on life is fucking distorted, because all they were used to was just killing people. It's okay to kill people because they've been raised to kill for entertainment, for sport. But then they'll move into an investigative environment where they're now being paid to kill, and yet they get told off for when they kill a police officer that treats them badly, or just going in haphazardly and just killing things and not working together as a team because that's what they've been trained to do. Again, Juzo is a real fucking tragic character here, and that was one of those tearjerker moments. Just realised just how fucked over Juzo was in life, which also puts some context in like the Stitch art thing that's going on, because there's a panel, and I won't show it on YouTube because I don't think YouTube would have liked that very much, where they're sort of strung up from like these fish hooks, like counting. There's a lot of fucking counting and torture to keep them sane. I'm not quite too sure why ghouls do this. There's a very interesting link between ghouls in general in this series, and I hate to think what the actual connecting factor is, whether it's something that happens in real life and like an actual torture technique, etc. and so forth. But on similar, we're also introduced to this ghoul who idolizes Yamori Jason, who one of the descriptors we get in these books is a brother, or views him as a brother, who kind of gets sidelined as this joke character because doesn't really read and speak all that well, like slurs words, mispronounces things, half-knows expressions, like he calls one character selfish, but keeps calling them shellfish because, you know, that's a very common mistake to make, like a shoulder-to-shoulder sort of thing. And they're treated as an idiot and a bit of a laughing stock, because when they were introduced, I thought, okay, we're going to have a serious antagonist, the younger brother sort of thing, how twisted they're going to be. It's like, no, they're just sort of a weird fantasizer, sort of looking up to this character, hoping to be tortured, happy to serve, etc. and so forth. And I just thought that was a bit disappointing, because there could have been a lot more that would be done with that, rather than treating them as a little disabled, at least that was, I feel, the vibe that was going for them, which is a bit sad. Not in like the sad Medusa sense, but sad that there was just some untapped potential there. And the character that's calling them stupid is Toka's brother, who is beaten near half to death near the beginning, because similar to the first episode of the second season, the first group of 8 here is that escape scene, you know, and Kaneki just thrashing everybody left, right and centre. He won't kill Toka's brother because that would upset Toko, so what Kaneki does is beat him half to death, which from his perspective is breaking 107 bones, and then goes through to the logistics of that, again showing the twisted nature of the torture and how it's just completely fucking broken him. And we also see this duality of emotions and philosophy and ethics, where Kaneki can't really dive into the ghoul side of him, otherwise he completely loses it and it becomes a monster. And we see at the very end he eats his friend Hide, who becomes an investigator because he's obsessing with ghouls. He works at the facility part-time. He's one of the like honchos, sees some potential when he works certain things out, and like, alright, you're now an investigator, do the exams and everything. And Kaneki, it's like trying to warn him, like, please run away, I don't want to hurt you sort of thing, but it's like half getting the words out, or whether they're just all internalized, because we do not know how well he's communicating to Hide. And we also don't know whether Hide is actually working out that Kaneki's a ghoul or not. I mean, he's told point blank, or at least inferred or whatever, but he's doing his best to help his mate, but Kaneki fucking eats him, which is just sad, just how much he loses it. And then immediately afterwards he has that battle with Ariyama, when it's revealed that what's happened with Rise, how he came about, and all around him these other failed experiments, which are technically his brothers and sisters, as worded by the Dr. Kano, who is with a Rogi tree, these bad ghouls essentially, for some motive which we don't know about, which again I'll talk about in just a moment. And Kaneki eats all those ghouls. He then evolves. He goes from like rank S to rank SS. He's now referred to as the centipede because his Kagane morphs into like this weird centipede-like thing, which is again a reflection of the torture that he's gone through, and just how much of a badass that he is, but also how fucking broken he is. And it's just really sad just seeing Kaneki fall apart, not knowing what he wants to do, because he's trying to find out what happened to Rise, retracing her steps, or like who she is, what she is, and how the fact that no one really knows what's going on finds her. And then he now has a purpose to protect everybody, because he failed to protect people because he wasn't strong enough, because he was obsessing over this thing, etc. and so forth. And as I said, he doesn't really know what to do with his life, and he's just sort of stuck in the middle, just lost. On top of the fact that you've just got these ghouls being hunted out of existence, these more nicer ghouls, because of the association with this really bad ghoul who's, you could argue, has turned over a new leaf, you know, with all the people and ghouls he's killed. Like, is that a fair justify? Like, does he deserve to be killed like this? Do any of the fucking ghouls deserve to be hunted down just because of who and what they are? Things that they can't really control, especially when most of them, again, are trying to atone for their sins to do nice things, and some of them are there who are... Again, I'm stopping myself because you have Kishimi, who is presented as an antagonist earlier on, but it's also seen as fairly weak. He's an arsehole at the beginning. They're all varying degrees of arseholes, but a fair amount of it is just eating people to survive, and I guess in this sort of like sad, rambly state, this is sort of leading me towards my final thoughts of the manga, because Tokyo Ghoul really fucking moved me. And with shit that's happening in the world at the moment, from Palestine to various parts of the US to Ukraine, there are people who are being hunted, tortured, kidnapped, murdered for just being themselves. Because they're just seen as the enemy because some other grander force has decided that they are a threat to be exterminated. That fascism is truly ruling this planet at the moment, and doesn't really matter all the human nuances that's happening with the investigator side of things. And I completely forgot to fucking mention, because there's a rather significant bit, the old crazy investigator's daughter fucking joins up and is working with him on. There's a bit of a romance there, which is sweet, some conflicted emotions, etc, etc, but they're all fucking assholes. But then again, so are the fucking ghouls, who, many of whom are just hunting the investigators, who, most of which are there because a ghoul took their life. Well, a loved one's life, not their life, obviously. Like, most of them there because a ghoul killed their mum, their dad, their sibling. They witnessed something horrible, and they want to avenge their loved ones. And ghouls are hunting the investigators because they killed their own loved ones. There's no real winners, no real losers, although I am leaning more on the side of ghouls because they're just being hunted for being what they are. There wasn't really any sign of them trying to integrate them into better society one way or another, but as a disabled, autistic, bisexual man with a whole variety of mental health issues who throughout all of his life has been treated as an enemy in one way or another, I feel on the side of minorities here with the ghouls. Even though there's some truly fucking despicable people, there's just so many ghouls that are just trying to survive, that are just trying to do what they can just to live in peace. And at the end of it, the big fucking battle is with the most peaceful fucking ghouls, because they're hunting the wrong person, and then the right one turns up, and then they fucking run off. So they fail. So all of that bloodshed was ultimately for nothing on both sides of things. It's difficult to avoid the violence and the bloodshed at the moment. Like, you log onto fucking social media, you're seeing fucking civilians getting blown up in the head, children malnourished. It's just a lot. And I don't know whether Tokyo Ghoul was intentionally meant to be a reflection of any of this, a warning, a commentary. But as cool as all the action is, as cool as all the artwork is, Tokyo Ghoul was a lot more emotionally stirring than I wanted it to be. And it's not like I didn't see those real-world connections at the time when I watched the anime. But the way that the anime tries and humanizes everyone on all sides of the fence, except for maybe like a few of the people of Erogi, they're clearly fucking bastards. At least that's how it's being presented, because you could argue that they're maybe working towards a goal of making ghouls more accepted. Albeit, that could be from the lens of being like ghouls being like the master race sort of thing, which is not good, because that's just fascism on the other side of things. Yeah, very emotional journey, a very emotional ride. Definitely worth the wait, because I've gotten older, a bit more wise to the world around me, even though I've been fairly tapped into things. I definitely feel over the last few years I've been more aware and more capable of seeing the evil and things just developing, maturing. I feel seen with Tokyo Ghoul in a really fucking morbid sense. And that's really fucking powerful stuff. And I can only hope that when I start reading Tokyo Ghoul I will experience similar emotions. And I know bits about it. Obviously, I know that it starts Kaneki, who goes under a different name now, an assistant investigator working under the woman investigator I mentioned a moment ago. She gets a promotion, now has a sidekick. But Lore, you said that Kaneki died. He was killed by that Aramara person. I do. but it's very clear from the artwork that is him, despite it being a different name and the fact that he's clearly got white hair. What I am hypothesizing at the moment, because it's alluded a little bit at the end, but it's not really followed. There's a lot of things that don't follow. We don't know what happens to half the fucking cast, just some of the big powerful ones. Because what's alluded to is actually that the investigator or the government or whatever are actually in on making these ghouls. And the only person that does know this is Aman. He's not able to properly talk about it because the fucking fight that happens and he dies. And there's a scene with Kano and a Rogi tree. And I reckon they're all working together to create like these one-eyed ghoul investigators, like using ghouls to hunt down ghouls. Because it's talked in the fiction, as I mentioned before, the one-eyed ghouls are much stronger than regular ghouls. So they're able to artificially engineer ghouls that will remove the ghoul problem. And it's revealed, obviously, from the things that happen, that Kaneki is amongst the best, despite being the fact that he was like the first or amongst the first. So now they've got him nailed down. They probably will just make more of him or different versions of him. I would not be surprised if any of the investigators that lost limbs would end up returning as one-eyed ghouls. That one young investigator that wants to do the very best that he can, who was worried about being killed, I would not be surprised if he becomes a ghoul. Juzo, who seems far too important of a character for them to wipe off or take out commission because he doesn't have a leg. I would not be surprised if they do something with him. Like either they give him like a prosthetic or make him a ghoul in some descriptor. And I'm saying him because he refers himself as him at one point. I really should be using them because it's not really described. He's identified as no gender or none. But I don't know, the whole thing with Chuzo's gender is a bit of a funny one. That I'd also want to see what happens to them emotionally, because especially towards the end you see they do have a father figure in like one of the head honcho investigators who was like the one who trained Amon originally at the university or some university, who kind of dismisses Amon a little bit, you know, like to let them to grow and foster on their own. Like there isn't much of a connection there, but all the connection that this investigator has is on Juzo trying to raise them as a kid, doing the best to look after them, circumstances providing. And they're out of commission now because they're in a coma. It's said that they're probably not going to wake up, which means they're going to wake up at a dramatically appropriate moment. But I'm really curious to see what's going to happen with Juzo, because I think one of the covers on one of the books is Juzo, so I don't know. I'm just speculating. So when I do my review of Tokyo Ghoul, it'll be very interesting to see what is right, what's wrong, and any other thing that may surprise me on the way. Because I said I don't really know what's going on, and if I'm right about that being Kaneki under a false name, it means that we've got a very fucking powerful half ghoul investigator who has the potential of turning fucking mad, and that won't look good for the investigators. And Erogi Tree, Kano, and the investigators, the higher-ups at least, all working together to making half-ghoul hunters, might explain why Aramana knows Kaneki's name, because they're quite high up. They may be in on it. So, who knows? Not too long ago, a far more depressed and borderline suicidal version of myself sat down and read Tokyo Ghoul for the very first time. All 14 volumes of it, back to back. It was about 1 hour per volume, which made for a pretty neat YouTube title. I'm not going to talk too much about that because I did a whole video talking about that in my Tokyo Ghoul review video. It was a rather chunky one, but I think it's a banger despite my emotional fluctuations throughout. So go and check that out in the corner card thing that's going to appear now, and have fun with that. And it's worthwhile watching because it's going to provide this video a bit more context and some form of a consistent narrative as we talk about its sequel, Tokyo Ghoul Re, which advances the plot line by a few years, I believe. I don't quite remember at the moment from what I read. And I was able to get it in this lovely deluxe edition box set. You can do something similar with the first edition of Tokyo Ghoul, I guess, but I didn't do that. I just bought them in a bundle that somebody was selling on eBay for 50 quid rather than 80 or so for the box set, which is something of a bargain, I feel. Didn't have as much luck with this one, unfortunately, because there were people who were sending bundles of them, like groups of 13 or 14, missing the last 2 out, or like they'd have like an odd collection, like 1579, you know, that sort of weird fucking jank, which is rather fucking frustrating. And I did the math that it was actually cheaper to buy a box set like this than buying all the manga individually. And the only people who were selling all the manga in one collected unit outside of the deluxe box set were people who were sending copies of the manga in Japanese. And whilst that's cool and all, I can't read a lick of fucking kanji, so that's going to be no fucking good use to me. But as you saw with the box, it's a pretty sturdy little thing with some gorgeous artwork taken from front covers of Tokyo Ghoul, which I have displaying on the screen for you now as I continue to waffle away. But like what I did with the Tokyo Ghoul review video, I think showing off the covers in the digital format is a lot more beneficial than trying to like glare the books into the light setup that we have here, which is less than ideal. It's workable, but trying to show things off in good condition is not great. But not to distract myself too much, I really like the condition of the box and its presentation and everything's been kept together inside with a bit of Velcro. Lovely Velcro noises there, and all the books are being stored like that, which I'll show a picture on screen, because if I try and maneuver the box in front of the camera, they're all just going to fall out and it won't look particularly nice as I'm trying to pick up all the different boxes. And there's some artwork on the top too. I'm not quite too sure who that's supposed to be at this time. Again, image on screen. I'm going to assume it's Kaneki, who has a different name now, given by like the silver grey hair and the red eye, so maybe it's him, maybe it's somebody else, because as you may recall from my review of Tokyo Ghoul that you have seen on the channel now, I had some thoughts and opinions about where I thought the series was going to go. I hypothesized that there are going to be different agents that are going to be returning as half ghouls, like if they were dead, dying, or they had some limbs missing, there would be that weird process that would be bringing them back into the fold as half ghouls. I've got no idea what Kaneki's game is, although I would not be surprised if they fucking cloned him, because how fucking powerful the ghoul is. Like, he's an invaluable member to the investigative team. I did assume, hypothesize, whatever, that human novel writer is a ghoul and is orchestrating a lot more than she's letting on, because it was kind of revealed that she is the child of the Ao Hiroshima, who also died at the end of the fucking manga. And I would be really intrigued to see if I'm correct with that, and just to see how powerful this character is, and just how far their manipulations are going, how they connect with Aogi Tree, the investigative unit, etc. and so forth. And also, if that is correct, why are they doing all this, and why would Aogi Tree and the scientist and everything else be interested in using ghouls to fight ghouls beyond the bleeding obvious? So I'm really excited to get stuck in, and I should probably stop waffling away, grab out volume 1 of Tokyo Ghoul, crack open its beautiful spine, and get stuck in. Ooh, boy, that's a manga. That's a pretty fine manga. And these three right here, 6, 7, and 8, I could not put them down. There was so much going on. Like, plot twist after, what the fuck after, gotcha moments after, revelation. It was just so intense, all like sandwiched in between a lot of violent ghoul on human action, ghoul on ghoul action at points too. It's very intense, and doesn't really stop to breathe at any given moment from 1 up to 8. With its story, its plot, well, it progresses kind of slightly. You're expecting to go in a certain direction, and then it's all like ramps up a load from 6 to 8. And it was getting to the point when I was reading it towards like 7 and 8, thinking, okay, this feels like the big reveal moment. All of this is sort of like happening way too soon. Like, there's got to be a fucking twist here to carry on for like another 8 volumes, remembering that the last one is a bit bigger than all the others, which would also confirm and deny my major suspicions regarding how much of the CGG Ghoul Hunter Group E is in on all this ghoul stuff going on. But just to rewind a little bit, going back to number 1, what is exactly happening? Well, it's all done through the organisation's perspective, as I kind of thought it would be. And Kaneki is now working with them. And he has a different name in this, but I'm just going to call him Kaneki just to keep us all on the same playing field here, not to be too confusing. I suspected that he was going to be a clone or some lookalike or something, but no, it's actually him. It's the same one, the half ghoul, the really dangerous one, who, towards the end of the previous manga, the investigators had no idea where to put him on a power level because he was just so unpredictably strong. No, that's him. They've brought him on as an investigator, but he don't remember who or what he is. He's just had the last 20 years of his memory just wiped, essentially, using some very strong human emotion suppressors. It's never really explained how they work, but he's trained to be a ghoul hunter investigator now by Ariyama. You know, the super strong ghoul hunter who's never been defeated, who rose to the top rank at the age 22, which was at that point unheard of. I say at that point because later on in the manga, after a big operation of removing out a lot of these the gourmet ghouls, which I'm phrasing as because you may recall in Tokyo Ghoul, the first collection, there's that whole arc with like the napkin sniffer who's wanting to eat Kaneki, and there's all these other ghouls there in Big Mama, who I didn't mention in my review. They managed to remove them and a bunch of others that were just around the vicinity as well. And it's within that operation that Juzo gets that promotion up a couple of ranks. So I can't quite remember Juzo's rank at this point, but it's commented on that nobody has excelled as quickly outside of Ariyama before. So it's kind of hinting to me that Juzo is going to be the one that's going to be replacing Ariyama at some point, I think. Kaneki, half ghoul investigator, trained by the best, under the supervision of Mado, the woman investigator who was the daughter of the crazy old guy from the first one, who doesn't really get much of a spotlight here, despite the fact that it's mentioned that she oversees and overwatches him. But all of this is revealed very early on, as I've mentioned, and the idea is that the entire investigation, or at least those in the know properly, well, they all know, they all recognise him, but he's being kept under strict supervision. If he ever loses himself to the ghoul aspect of him, they'll just hunt him down. And it's very interesting how that's all played out like a not quite Dr. Jekyll and Hyde sort of thing. That he's hearing these voices in his head and seeing this persona, which is Kaneki when he was at his most feral, for lack of a better phrase. And there are a couple of moments where that feralness takes over and he's trying to help him remember who and what he was, and then he sports his full power through his Kagane, and there's, in addition to whatever little Kagane sword things, I forget their weapon names already, that they throw so much at you, different new characters, factions, etc. and so forth, that those couple of volumes are very confusing. In fact, there's actually quite a lot of this that is fairly confusing, where you're getting constant flashbacks from characters who get mentioned once or twice, ghoul characters you've probably forgotten about, and this is also coming from the perspective that all these names are of course in Japanese, and I'm trying to remember all these like foreign names and these characters, and a lot of them do look fairly similar to each other. Some of them don't get mentioned a lot because it's mainly from the investigator side point, and even from the investigator side point, like there's just a lot of people to keep track on, and I just kept getting people confused with each other, and I actually got two key ghoul characters towards the end confused with each other, and I was just thinking, how the fuck are they occupying two different spaces at the same time? And then I realised who one of them was. I was like, oh shit, this is actually a pretty significant moment. But anyway, but get back to Kaneki, it's really interesting how it's been chosen to deal with that, rather than being like, he has to take this medication, otherwise these things come back to him. No, it's just like an overriding thing that's just waiting to break free and just like stir up shit, as it were. And this obviously scares his crew. Now his crew, I think, is a very interesting almost hypocritical thing, because remember the part where we're dealing with like half human half ghoul scenarios. You've got somebody who's acting engineering and they're a big threat to society. We need to take him out an Aogi tree and try and work out what the fuck is going on. And the owl, remember, the owl was returned and is like eating other ghouls. And I was right, it was the author ghoul woman who actually has orchestrated everything from the behind the scenes. And I'm sure that she has orchestrated a lot more than the novels are letting on, because spoilers, she's dead now, maybe. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. But we're having that realised, that made me feel so good, because I feel so intelligent just for a little moment. So you got all these different things going on. The half ghoul, half human thing, they're trying to stomp them out, but the organisation has decided to do something similar of their own. using a similar technology process of making like the Kagane weapons. They come up, the Quinks, that's it, they share the same name as the weapons, the Quinkheads or whatever they're called, who are these half-human ghoul hunters. And it explains in the manga how they go about doing it and wrapping it around the bloodstream or whatever, or heart or something like that. I don't really remember, and it's not really that important, other than the fact that the investigators have got like a group of 5 human ghoul hybrids now of their own, who all have their own agendas and personalities. Some of them don't have a lot of development for one reason or another, or the author's just been very slow developing all of them. Because there's one character who dies in the middle point, whose name I've forgotten, who's often referred to as Shazan or Shizuru or something like that, who's illustrated like this short, messy hair and like these jaggedy teeth, which isn't to do with him being a ghoul or anything, that's just how he was illustrated, just to make him stand out a bit more, I think. Who's a bit of a wild cannon sort of thing, not quite sure of himself, trying to find his place in the world. Who, for the beginning part, he's the second in command underneath this guy called Yuri, who's purely in it for the power, who's purely in it to be the best and getting the reputation, all the rest of it, to the point that none of this group's actually working well together at all. Yuri's just going off doing his own thing, Shazan is just believing everything that Yuri says. That quickly goes down the shitter, which I'm really glad, because that was going to be a really fucking frustrating narrative if that was going to be kept up for more than a volume or two. And also to think about how stupid that would be in a situation like the investigators, where everyone needs to be fucking working together. Which does bring on a little interesting little side point that's only touched upon a couple of times so far, that it's kind of hinted at a little bit in the original run, but it's here, it comes in the spotlight a lot more, just how self-serving every single investigator wants to be, like to be the best, to get the most money, to get the claim for the glory, you know, for this, that, and the other. That it's really fucking petty that they're not protecting the people because it's the right thing to do. They're just doing it so they're getting the fucking buzz. Even with the empathy that we got from the previous mangas, just how they all signed up because they had lost someone to ghouls, they wanted to take revenge or something like that. That level of humanity has been stripped from the investigators, I feel. And even with some of the other investigators we stick around with, all bar the ghoul ones, for the most part, the half-ghoul ones, I should say, you don't really see that humanity with them. They're all varying levels of callous. There's this new guy who just loathes Kaneki because, rightly so, he's very suspicious of him. He just talks down to everybody because he's like part of this like prestigious family who has spent decades hunting, well, centuries rather, hunting ghouls, and yeah, he's the only member of his family left, or one of the few that's left. Going back to the ghoul, half-ghoul investigators, you have this female character who for the opening bits just spends a lot of her time in bed, just sleeping things off like a teenager. And I thought they were going to do something interesting with her, that maybe she's doing it because she's traumatized or something. Although there is a level of that that's clearly there, because she's only there for the money, not for her own self, but to help her own family out. But she's not doing anything about it, but she's still getting the credit and all the rest of it, which is varying levels of frustrating for Yuri, for example. But they don't really develop that, or at least they haven't done yet. And so we don't know why she was the way that she was, but she quickly snaps out of it because Shazan is able to get her to snap out of it, brings her to meetings, drags her out of bed. You've then got one of the more interesting characters in all this called Toro, who I think is the inverse of Kaneki. He wears an eye patch. He's a trans character, and his transness is a vital part of the story. He is a trans man. He underwent an operation when he was having the operation to become a half ghoul. Because he was born a girl, he was a chest binder. The part of this storyline is they're hunting this ghoul called the Torso, who is attacking and killing women. You can probably see where this is going now. And Torso can smell the woman on him. That even though he's gone through the transition, the ghouls are able to pick up those fine minutiae. And Torso is completely obsessed with Toro, to the point where much later on, I think it's in 8 or might even be 7, there's this big old raid on this island where the investigators believe the Orogi tree are hiding out, which it turns out they are, of course. It's not revealed how they know that they're there, but they reveal that they're there. And Toro is on this assault, which at this point, when I'm about to describe happens, is on day 6. And just before that, during that aforementioned operation where so many different people get a promotion, Toro doesn't really want to kill people. Toro doesn't really want to harm people, can't really control his powers properly. Not in the sense that they're going wild, but the fact that he can't muster up the strength to do that. And it's revealed with his kidnapping from Torso, who marries him and then basically rapes him. It's never stated, but it's very clear that Toro is being raped constantly and abused. And we find out that Toro, in between being raped and this operation and the previous one, is able to control himself a bit more, not like anyone control or abuse him and be at the whims of any other man. It's revealed that in actual fact that his father was very abusive towards him because he identified as a boy when he was in fact a girl, and I'm doing that very loosely, from the father's perspective. That's not what I think, of course. And it's inferred that the father molested the kid as well, because kid Toro is like begging the father, is like, please, I'll do anything, you're the best dad, don't do anything, well, you're just to please me then, sort of thing. And there's a bit of dialogue where he says, maybe this is just my fate, just to be abused by men, which is so fucking harrowing to read. And I'm not quite too sure which one of the two is alive, because Yuri, with their sense of smell, is able to pick up the scent of Toro, and we see like a dismembered body, which is what the thing that the torso has done. And it's revealed with some writing that it was molested, things removed, orifices had certain things shoved into them, a tongue was removed, I want to say. It's a lot more graphic than that, but very like in a blunt medical sort of fashion. I don't think I could read verbatim, and I'm not going to put up on screen, just because I think YouTube would just not like that very much. And I'm unsure whether it was Torso that did this to Toro or vice versa, purely because it's revealed that Toro actually killed their parents, but didn't just kill their parents, but did so in a very over-the-top, bloody, callous way, and they enjoyed it. But then, realising what they had done, they sort of like suppressed the trauma of what they did, and they, over the years, presumed it was a ghoul. So I don't know at this point whether it was Toro snapping and letting that part of them come back to the surface, which is part of the reason why I think they're kind of like a reverse Kaneki, beyond the fact they got short black hair and they wear an eye patch, or whether this is something that Torso did to Toro. I don't know at this point, but either way, they're just as horrifying as the other, honestly, and it's a very interesting bit of writing. I could be just really fucking stupid and have just completely missed that very clear bit of writing. And even with the bit of writing that's supposed to show a bit of empathy towards Torso, who was just kept in the woods all of their life with their father, who then just abandoned them because he put the father in danger by bringing a woman back or whatever, it didn't work too well, honestly, because we had seen the fucking horrible shit that Torso done prior to that. The cycle of abuse didn't break with Torso, but because of how Torso's been presented, it didn't really get exactly the same reaction for me. Like, you would see like similar atrocities, or different atrocities I should say, because no one's quite depraved as Torso in this, do horrible things, but you feel for the different investigators in one way or the other. I mean, you can check out my previous review just how drained it made me feel, in a good way, just because of how effective the writing was. It doesn't quite have the same effect here. I was also correct assuming that some of the investigators who were injured would come back as a ghoul in one way or another. I mentioned Jazot earlier on was able to get their revenge on the ghoul that raised them in a wonderful display of violence. And you may be wondering how they managed to do that, because I mentioned that they lost their leg. Well, the investigation team restored their leg via prosthetic, which is where they keep all their Quinqué knives in now, which I think is a really fucking cool idea. And it's also very fitting for Juzo to have something so quirky as well. And Juzo has clearly grown up quite a bit in these few years. Still a little kooky here and there, like when they meet Kaneki earlier on, Kaneki is being like proper ghoul investigator. They greet each other, and the first thing that Juzo does is like go into Kaneki's pockets and pull out some snacks and treats, just as a bit of a routine that they have. And there's a really nice little detail earlier on that Kaneki was unsure why, but the first time that they met, Juzo gave them some money, which is referencing when they first met in the first round of the manga, that Juzo took some money from Kaneki, just because they could, and I just think that was a nice little attention to detail. Juzo's drawn a little differently here. They seem to have like a darker hair colour now, at least from what I could gather from how they're illustrated. And Kaneki's hair is also white to begin with. And gradually, as the manga goes on, it becomes more black, which resembles to me two things. Like, the blending of the more human and the ghoul nature, the trauma of the investigator, human and ghoul hybrid sort of thing, and I'm mashing them all together because as Kaneki's like gaining their memories, their hair's becoming more black, and they're remembering bits about how they joined the investigator team, like going through their memories of like having their name chosen for them. There's a bit towards the end where they look into that old prison cell and they remember being locked up. They had their eyes removed, of course. You remember the fight with Ariyama. Of course, they grew back. So he was taken there, kidnapped, given books to read, and etc. and so forth. But Kaneki comes back properly a little beforehand during this operation to remove the Rosewood family of ghouls, who are associated with the main ghoul who wanted to eat Kaneki because he had this great aroma, scent, taste, all the rest of it. Despite the fact that the manga describes him as American, he's now suddenly German. I'm not quite too sure the consistency with that, but they find him, he restores his strength because he got really weak because Kaneki disappeared. There's a whole really interesting emotional narrative that happens with that. There's this ghoul servant who gets kidnapped by the owl, you know, the author ghoul, who I'm just going to refer to as the owl so we all know who I'm talking about now. And she tortures him in a similar way that Jason tortured Kaneki. I'm not quite too sure what the purpose was beyond it's all part of a big scheme. Torturing this ghoul to feel that they don't have to be loved, to do what they needed to do for themselves rather than doing it for somebody else's whims. Doesn't quite pan out like that, unfortunately, but there's a really chilling illustration that goes with that, and again, I'm not entirely too certain if I can put that up on the screen, because unlike the Kaneki ripping his face off for the previous manga, where that's very clearly over-the-top cartoon stuff, this one image I had no idea even existed, and it's sort of borderline some self-harm with like having things stitched onto his face. Well, his eyes and mouth are stitched shut, sort of, and I don't really want to delve too much and like putting that much on screen. And also, he's assuming under a boy's name when the manga then describes him later on as a girl. So there's a fair amount of trans representation here and gender swapping and everybody just being fairly chill with it unless the times when they're not for one reason or another, which I think is pretty neat. You know, just how novel it is to be praising something like this in this day and age where having any level of trans rep is bad, it's woke fucking nonsense, it's fucking grow up, man. Like, I think it's really cool, and I think even some of the more traumatic, horrible like stuff with Toro is handled really respectfully, that it doesn't seem to feel cheap or tacky. It's done with care, which makes me think that the author themselves might have some experience with some of these things, or it's got someone or some people in their life they could refer to for sources of inspiration in one way or another for research, or just, you know, they've interacted with sad people and they have a bit of like secondhand knowledge sort of stuff, which I think it's really neat that they've done their due diligence. But I did distract myself a little bit there as I was talking about investigators that come back at school or one other form or another. One investigator who died, the investigator who I talked about in my review, who was scared of fucking dying, he becomes a ghoul under the same process that Kaneki was made into one. So he's basically as strong as Kaneki, but he died very quickly into becoming a fucking monster. And annoyingly, he's referred to as the owl, which is different from the one-eyed owl. I don't know what is this manga's obsession with owls and also ghouls torturing other ghouls, but I suppose it's just culture, I guess. But I do also like it, the fact that they do live by their own rules and they do perform some really fucking heinous shit because they're not abiding by human rules. And I'm glad that despite being a shonen manga, which is usually typically advertised towards teenagers and young adults, it doesn't really shy away from the horror without coming across as over the top and tacky. Even though throughout the years people have described Tokyo Ghoul as being like this edgy, try-hard sort of thing, I personally feel that it's all done pretty tastefully, and at times the action is depicted in a really quick, fast, like epic sort of manner, as per the original manga, where fight scenes that would usually last some minutes in an anime like last only a couple pages here to give you the sense of the scale of power, but also the speed in which things are happening as well. We also find out a bit about the cafe ghouls, Tuka, Yomo. Obviously the old guy got eaten in the previous manga. They're not in the same cafe, it's in a cafe called Ri. coincidentally the same Ri as the manga's namesake, and Kaneki goes there a couple times, but he's kind of recognizes people, but he doesn't. Harmony isn't there, who's like the daughter ghoul of the two ghouls, who has this like very good like sense awareness ability. She gets taken up by Erogi tree, which is unfortunate. It's not really explained just how that happens properly, but she's like not wanting to be coddled like a child or whatever, and if that just ended up being the best way for her, like maybe she got groomed in that position, I don't quite remember. She gets kidnapped by the investigators at one point. It's all like in the middle point of the manga during the like napkin sniffer operation. There's a proper word for it, but I can't quite remember what it is. It's also at this point where it's revealed that the one-eyed owl returns. It's also here where Kaneki becomes Kaneki again, really, or at least it's the prologue to that. Because Kaneki has fully black hair at this point, still an investigator and still using his cool powers. So it's like, okay, so the two sides have come together now, but now he's a cold, callous son of a gun because he's a lot more cold, a lot more violent. He has this eerie smile that people comment on, and I was expecting it leading up to him like a weird villain arc. That's how he'd be going toe-to-toe with Arima. He's dressing like him as well, but all in black rather than all in white. But then a few issues later, or like he's might even be like a couple later, turns out at this point is also when he gets all his memories back. And he lets go of Himona, and as well as every other fucking ghoul in Cochlea, this big old prison cell, all the dangerous ghouls that were being kept. We also find out in between all of this, because as I said, a lot is happening in these latter manga, to the point where I actually just stopped fucking and making notes here that I keep referring to. It's revealed that Kung Fu ghoul from the previous one was the father figure of Risei. And it's interesting how he gets killed off by Arima, puts up a good fight. Of course, Arima being fucking Arima, just like demolishes everybody that's in his fucking path. Erogi tree, or at least Toka's brother, and Banjo makes a return. He's now with Erogi tree, sort of, wanting to rescue all these different ghouls, and they find out that Kaneki has, returned back to the path of ghoul. They all sort of get away. It's the biggest reveal of them all, where I'm beginning to think, okay, this is kind of like the final epic boss fight sort of thing, so why are we ending it here? Kaneki goes through several transformations in this fight, trying to discover himself, what he wants out of life. He works out the character, that's who he is. It doesn't really land on any, like, true conclusion, and I word it as such because usually in fights like this, like, the character discovers himself, they find all the strength on the reserve to take out the big bad sort of thing. And he doesn't do that. He still has these weaknesses that Arima completely capitalizes on. And I do like the consistency of that. That it's fitting with Kaneki, like, going through these different phases, the haircut of the trauma, not really coming to terms with everything, not really tackling anything, constantly running away, hiding through one reason or another. How he, as I kind of mentioned a moment ago, he's at, like, the flip side of Arima, from like the appearance, the abilities and whatnot. And he's fighting Arima, and he's like, I've never lost to anybody before. You have an opportunity to kill me. Do you take it? He says no. And it made you to think that, oh, okay, Arimima's going to fucking kill Kaneki here, and then the rest of the plot's going to go on without him. No, Arima kills himself. He takes his broken quinque, slits his throat. But I kept looking at that page and the one after that back again. Like, wait, why did he fucking kill himself? That makes no fucking sense. What the fuck is going on? Before I describe that, I will mention that all in between all of this, the one-eyed owl is dead properly now, and the other important ghoul who I kept confusing with her was the remaining twin, because one was black, one was white, and she successfully merged with her sister and then becomes sort of like that, which is why the appearance looked a bit similar and the design was a little similar as well. That fight happens and a bunch of other people kill with her. The ghoul king, the one-eyed ghoul, I should say, to use the proper things, is dead, gone, vamoosh. But it's revealed that Aramama, one of the head honchos, and Risei were created by CCG, who are operated by ghouls, to be half human, half ghouls. Which is kind of what I was expecting, because remember I had envisioned that the investigators were in on it, or Arimama was in on it, which is why he knew about Kaneki. It's not revealed how he knows about Kaneki, because he's dead now. But that's what we've got now. And now Kaneki has got his Aramama's lot, who was given this instruction to protect him and to do what he wants to do, sort of thing, to wipe out Erogi Tree and reveal the truth or whatever, as Kaneki's got all his memories back, and like has essentially usurped Aramama's position as the best hunter out of the lot. And I say usurp deliberately because at the end of the book where you're looking through like the different profiles, and also the beginning of Volume 9, Aramama is referred to as the One-Eyed King. But so is the One-Eyed Owl is referred to as the King. Because she gets captured. I'm sorry that I'm jumping all over the place with this, but I'm rather excited by the plot. I've only done notes, and a lot of these things all happen all at once. She gets captured because the investigators for Connecticut work out what's going on. She does this talk, to advertise her book, which is literally called One-Eyed King, but in like German or something like that, or some other fucking language, meant to create ghoul sympathizers and to encourage ghouls to come up with an uprising sort of thing. They arrest her and she gives this little thing, and she reveals to Erogi Tree and the others that she is the One-Eyed King, but so is Ariyama, half ghoul, half ghoul. Kaneki's a half ghoul. He's taken out them both. He has now become the One-Eyed King, and it's revealed at the very end at number 8 that Ri means king, i.e. Tokyo Ghoul King. Or the King of Tokyo Ghoul, however you would want to word that sort of thing. So now, you've got Kaneki with a bunch of half-human ghouls who were trained under Ariyama and are thus some of the best fucking fighters in Japan. You've got remnants of Erogi Tree, i.e. Toka's brother, the cafe lot, all going up against the investigators, Erogi Tree, the organisation, the mysterious one that the old man ghoul, the owl, there's so many different names and things, they're all very fucking confusing. They're the ones that are calling the shots, but they have been killed now. But there's obviously some grander conspiracy under the works, of course, as we've got 8 fucking more volumes to get through. Yeah, it's a lot of really confusing shit. And again, I can only apologise for how all over the place and how rambly all of this is. And you're probably just as confused as I was when I was reading it. But I'm only relying on some notes here, and I don't want to write too much down, and I have to remember a script, essentially. But I also wanted to do it like this because I wanted to come and deliver just how hectic things are and all the different plot seeds and twists and gotcha moments that happen. It's a real fucking clusterfuck of excitement, tragedy, abuse. Like, the whole cycle of abuse thing is just so fucking prevalent in this series, and this is only halfway through. Like, this could have been a great place just to wrap things up and just like leave it open in the air sort of thing, but no, we've got another fucking 8 more volumes to go, and I don't have a fucking clue what's going to happen. I can't even fucking guess what's going to happen now. It's all just fucking bonkers. So I'm recording this particular segment on the 3rd of February 2026 in the year of our Lord Telos. It is a Tuesday, which means a weekend has just gone and passed. And my intention was to read the first group of 4 on the Saturday and the second group of 4 on the Sunday, because I had a lot going on, divvy up the reading time, etc. and so forth. But no, it didn't exactly happen like that, because I was so engaged and engrossed with everything that I was reading. I read all 8 of them on the Saturday, because, as I said, I was just really engrossed with it, and it was just so high action, so many stakes at a risk, and there was plot twist after revelation, and moments where I was literally gasping to myself and just felt surprised and shocked and awe with what I was seeing and reading. And there's a couple moments towards the end where the fiction is presented in such a way that I was just surprised, and it really just amplified the horror of this series. And I'm just turning back and I missed something, like there's some pages missing. It's like, no, this is how we're really going to be presenting this information. And I'll get to those specific bits when I get to them, but from the fucking get-go, like from volume 9 onwards, it's just so fucking chaotic. And like, I didn't mention it on the previous segment, but the guy on the front cover here looks like my boy Amon. And I said, nah, it can't be him. It's probably going to be somebody else, like a new player or whatever, because, you know, he died in Tokyo Ghoul. Like, we have confirmed that he is dead. Like, we see him die. But no, he is captured by Erogi Tree and is turned into a half ghoul, and Kano, the scientist, sees great potential in him, but because Amon is just so fucking strong, like his RC levels or whatever just fucking explode and he becomes uncontrollable, and like he's considered a failure, partly because of his unbreakable will, but also because of how rapidly he spirals out of control. And he appears on this fight, and I'm looking, no, that ain't Amon. No, but it's Amon! He turns up, and of course, he loses control because he's a Kakuja ghoul, because he's just been hunting and eating other ghouls, like he's not going to kill people. So he just quickly spirals out of control and becomes a fucking monster, and there's this big old fucking free-for-all of all these different hunters wanting to take him out. And like the main bulk of like the Quinky... sounds like fucking Tinky Winky, sorry, like the half ghoul squad, like trying to take him on. That looks like this special investigator Amon, and it's confirmed to be Amon, and it's just such a cool moment and revelation. And that's not even how it starts, because you've got the leader of Erogi Tree who's there, who again has got all these different like Kaneko like ghoul bits coming off him. He's got this really cool armor sort of thing. The owl turns up and betrays Erogi Tree because he's been plotting this whole revenge thing for ages, because he just wanted to be an investigator, and just like every fucking ghoul who's captured and tortured this, his fucking psyche breaks, and he kills the leader of Erogi Tree, and he is hoping to be accepted back into this, you know, because he's done a good thing, he's clearly level-headed. But no, the investigators in charge there still see him as a fucking threat, because of all the people he's killed, all the like damage that he's done, and how he's a dangerous ghoul. And it's sort of at this point when Amon turns up, and Erogi Tree is sort of like, and the owl is sort of like protecting him. But it gets a step further than that, because Mado, like the woman investigator, the son of the crazy one, she protects the owl at one point from dying, because it's talked upon a little bit in the first series, like how these two are friends, are like rivals, are gone with each other, and she protects him. She betrays the CCG to spare his life, and she gets injured and then taken away by other ghouls, but I'll talk about that in a moment. But wow, like, it's nice that they remembered that plot point, and that there's these weird feelings between the two characters. And it's so interesting to me that of all the people that spares him, that the way that he survives is because of her. It's also a bit sad, really, that they don't really do much with her, given how important and prominent that she was in the original run of Tokyo Ghoul, that she sort of steps up a bit, but then takes a bit of a back burner sort of thing, which you could argue might be a representation of like the women to man ratio in working environments. But I'm really picking at straws here to try and work out why she wasn't as important, maybe dealing with all the grief and the trauma of losing a mom, which of course she is able to see again, and we do see later on that they do connect in this really nice, heartfelt, messy, emotional confrontation where she's recovering in this sort of like medical ward bay that these schools have set up, and there's this whole mission trying to retrieve like this cure to stop her from becoming a ghoul. I don't exactly know what's going on, but they're talking about her RC levels or whatever, so I don't know if she's like a ghoul or half ghoul at this point, but something's clearly amiss. And like she walks off, and Amon goes with her eventually at the very end of it, and it's implied that they have their little kiss that we were teased in Tokyo Ghoul, because their working relationship and whatnot, but we don't see them kiss. And it's like one of them says, "Oh, don't turn away this time," but we don't actually see them kiss. So fuck you for taking that away from us, but that's a real fucking classy way, and just leaving it up in the air to see whether they actually hook up or not. And in the epilogue, which is all very soppy and perhaps a little ham-fisted, but I'll talk about that later, it is very much implied that they do, walk away, because there's a bit of saying that some ghouls, are still violent, but some are not, and it shows like the silhouettes of these two, it's clearly those two, walking off together. And I'm just glad that they get there happily ever after together. And Amon also is able to wrap up some of his grievances, because he talks to Kaneki later on, and it also helps out with removing the main big threat of ghouls, the clowns. which is made up of that priest guy who was like the father figure of Amon, and also we find out that he raised the crow as well, which adds another layer of fuckery in there as well, because there's a bit of a conflict between those two at one point, but the priest dude is just too fucking strong for most of the ghouls and the investigators to be dealing with. But Amon is the one who is able to take him out, and it's really sad because, you know, he struggled to get rid of him previously and just kept him alive and just using him for information because of everything that went past. He still loved him, which might not make a lot of sense to people because of the things that he did to all these kids and just the nasty piece of shit that he is. But relationships and emotions are messy and they're human, and it often doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, just to dump you with some personal trauma of mine, my dad nearly killed my family and I when I was 6. I was like 2 months into being 6 years old, and he was an alcoholic and he was a drug user. Sort of chased us out of this house, out of this incident, and he manipulated and gaslit me and my brother into seeing him a lot. It's difficult to talk about sometimes, but I don't have a problem talking about it. And I didn't really see him for most of my life, and he just sort of moved on and did his own fucking thing, and he sort of went on this downward spiral because he had 2 kids that were disabled. And I'm not blaming myself, I'm putting the blame on him because he just fucking wasn't man enough to take on the responsibility of doing parent, like to be a decent fucking dad. Like, the only good memory I have of him was him taking me to a local playground and pushing me on a swing, and then I would, in a slapstick way, kick him over and you'd be over the top with it. Like, that's a real fucking sad thing indeed, that's the only good memory I have. And in a weird fucking scenario, like a couple of years ago, because my dad was a bass player and he had a couple of these bands, some video compilation that a mate of his put up just appeared on YouTube one day, and it's just really angered me just how he went on with his life and just he went on with his life without his 2 fucking kids, just didn't give a shit anymore. But despite that, there is still a part of me that loves him. Even after all of that, even though that he's dead still, I occasionally visit his grave and just pay respects and just vent about things that are going on. Kind of very film-like, I know, but as I said, it's illogical, yes, but emotions they don't make a lot of sense. So with that particular instance in Tokyo Ghoul Re, and just the ghoul, you know, being told that Amon loves him, it's just caused him to laugh himself to death. I mean, he's critically injured because he's just not strong enough for Amon anymore. Like, Amon, like, tackles his trauma and kills his trauma. He doesn't quite get it, and he's laughing about it. So I was able to resonate with that with quite a bit. That was a very strong, impactful moment to me. There's a few moments like this where characters are literally tackling their traumas head on. I mean, it ends with Kaneki killing Rise, or a version of her, because it gets very fucking wild towards the end how the plot develops. And he has another one of these flashbacks because he dies or nearly dies again. And there's some weird fucking embryo thing growing on. I'm not quite too sure what the main antagonist is wanting to achieve by this, but anyway, like, he finds a version of her and he kills her, which, again, very impactful that you have to... the whole ethos of this manga is that in order to have change and to make things better in the world, you have to tackle it head on, and it's messy. And in the case of equality and equity that you find with Tokyo Ghoul, there is going to be violence, there is going to be conflict, and peace can only come from violence. You think of any fucking tragedy and colossal fuck up of the human race, very little of it has come from peace all the way through. Peace has come from violence, the calm after the storm, because it seems to be the only way that mankind can listen to each other. And so there are many instances of characters confronting their trauma in these really violent and emotional ways, and it's really beautiful. Like, that sort of, like, I guess, to summarize my thoughts on this, but there is just a lot more that happens with this that I want to talk about even more. So it's with the next volume, volume 10, and I'm not going to break each of these points up like this unless there's something specific that happens in them, such as with this one, where there's a time jump of a few months. Erogi Tree is effectively no more. Most of its members are either dead, and what remains goes into hiding for a little bit, which I'll talk about in just a moment, but it's the CCG that we, again, focus most of the manga on. Well, it sort of splits up a bit more between Ghoul and CCG at this point, but the CCG is now crumbling because its leadership is gone, because, from what I mentioned in the previous segment, the leaders were assassinated, although it turns out that one of them had survived, even though he was shot in their head. So I'm guessing he got better from that, because the main honchos of the group are ghouls, so I'm guessing he recovered from that. It's not really explained how he survives this, and when it is revealed that he survives in like issue 13, I've made some notes here, that was like one of those big fucking shock moments, because a lot of the leadership sort of causes the group to downward spiral at this point, because it's a cousin of the group that takes over, and we see bits of him. He's a ghoul. He's a bit camp and flamboyant. There's some little slapstick moments I think I referred to in the previous segment that just sort of lessened the tone for me a little bit. But he takes over this great tactician and allies sort of things, works out what the clowns are going to be doing, and he's the one that's actually controlling the clowns at this point. He's also controlling like this secret group of Ghoul investigators that we see a little bit in Tokyo Ghoul, these guys in coats and top hats essentially, and then mention a little bit in some of the earlier Tokyo Ghoul re-stuff, who are described to be like the best of the CCG, who are only brought in at a sheer crisis, which they're brought in this case just to eliminate all ghouls. And there's bits that happen in the manga where 90% of ghouls in Tokyo are destroyed, which is frightening to think about. There's like a full-on genocide that then occurs. I mean, there's a genocide that happens all the way through the Tokyo Ghoul, but it feels far more active and destructive, and it gets a lot more fucked up because the CCG, like, it gets a lot more fucked up because he then brings in Kano, the scientist dude, to help them with the research of ghouls. But the way that happened is that he brings on kids to become half ghouls, and they're described to be a lot better because they've got a greater sense of smell, greater senses or whatever, and it's through these kid ghouls that are basically obliterating all these other ghouls alongside the hunters and like the main troop of ghoul investigators. And I forgot to mention it's Turo who survives, and is the one that does all those really rancid things to Torso. And because this is Tokyo Ghoul and he's been tortured, he now has white hair and his psyche completely fucking snaps, which I have very strong mixed feelings on, because the way that his plot develops now is that he is madly in love with Kaneki, but he feels that makes him a woman, because wanting to accept that he's gay, and because that's what we've talked about, he was born a woman, now a man. But his whole arc is centered around him coming to terms with what he is and feeling that nobody is really accepting him who as he is, and because he now feels this way to Kaneki, he must be a woman, and he just fucking hates that about himself, and he hates that he's feeling that everybody's seeing him as a woman and thus less than. And he portrays the CCG in a sense that there's a bit that happens towards the end with the whole fucking Kaneki embryo scenario, where he then throws this whole thing into disarray, and he's fighting the rest of the organization, fighting the rest of the half ghoul hunters, and they have to fight back at him and like to put him back in his place. But they also make him realize that he's family, and they see him for who he is as a person. They don't mention anything about his gender. Toro doesn't really mention his gender, but from things that we see happen in the manga, it's very fucking clear that he's referring to stuff to do with his biological makeup, as it were. And so they help him make him seen that way, and it's a really beautiful bit of writing. You know, just accepting people who and what they are, how they want to be referred to themselves, not putting their gender or their lack of gender necessarily at the forefront. You know, I mean, obviously in this case it's really important because Toro was born a woman, they're now a man, but they don't make any mention of their gender. They just accept Toro for who and what he is. They see him as family. And I think that's just a really great bit of writing, but I feel mixed about this purely because it sort of borderlines like the sort of like Japanese tropey, like yandere sort of possessive nature over Kaneki, goes completely nutty over him, and just it's becomes like the worst of the like the ghoul hunters. And I think they could have been expressed a little better for my personal tastes, but overall the way that Toro was redeemed, as it were, just brought back into the fold a little bit, that is really nice. There's a bit earlier on where the group of hunters also have to go and fight Yuri, who is the half ghoul who was only in it for himself. He goes through these tremendous arcs, just not so much thinking about himself, that he is thinking about the rest of his group and the rest of the operation by the rest of it, because he technically is now a full-on ghoul, because he keeps going back to the scientist, not Kano, like to have more like this ghoul stuff put in, so he's like the best that he can be to hunt down ghouls to avenge his father, etc. and so forth. But it now gets to a point where he's actually a full-on ghoul, because he can't eat meat anymore, his RC levels are really high up, and he sort of loses himself. And the sleepy half-ghoul woman, who again becomes her own, who also turns out to be really fucking strong herself, it's just her, it's described like her lack of control and a lack of her full-on freedom or whatever. It allows her to be like that much stronger, because she's able to manipulate her Kaneki to like fist and stuff and pummel him. She is the one that brings him back, and it's implied that these two have a bit of a relation, have feelings for each other, which doesn't really fully get capitalized on, which is fair enough. Like, I like it that these two have a closer bond, and like not everybody ties the knot, as it were, but there is actually have a little funny resolution towards the end, like able to bring him back. That, wow, you did it, and she just sort of shrugs it off, because she sort of embraces him, like Kaneki holding him like face first, like embracing this monster face on, and then before we get to the suppressor rather, I believe that's how they deal with him. It's like, oh, it's nothing. Sometimes guys just need to have a big pair of titties shoved in their face. It just made me laugh, because as an admirer of titties, I agree. But it's just nice just how casual it is, just low-key, just, you know, just another day at the office. It's just nice. But going back to like the whole thing with the half-kid ghouls, like that's real fucking creepy. It's messed up. And you could argue that there's like some sort of allegory in there where grooming kids through fascist means like shaping them into your image, like basically what people are attempting to do now with certain events that are going on and things that have happened in the past, and just that's basically how fucking cults and fascism works, indoctrination and the rest of it, and just the brainwashing of them. It made me feel uncomfortable, and it rubbed me the wrong way, but in the right way, I guess, because it's very politically poignant. And Tokyo Ghoul, I didn't realise how recent it is, because the last issue came out in 2020, which is like 6 years ago as of the recording of this, and we began to see some of those sort of things appear in 2015, 2016, because it's sort of when Trump was getting into power, and I'm fairly certain there were things happening in Japan at that point as well, but I'm not going to make any comment about that because I'm not entirely too sure about that. But with things across the pond, as we say here in the UK, it's easy to see why some of those things might have just slinked their way in there. Although it could have just easily been, okay, what could I introduce here to really creep things out and just add to the horror and just bring something new into the fold? Oh, let's have half-ghoul kids. Which a lot of the investigators don't seem to comment on. They just sort of silently fall into line. There is like a revolt later on, which is Yuri and one of the other investigators, his mentor figure, go and challenge the new leader, whose name I've completely forgotten, about this, and they see that he's got some ghouls in there, some of the clown, like the clown leaders as it were. They're not able to defeat him, but it's when Madu, the former head honcho guy, comes in with some of these other investigators with like Kenkei armor piercing round, these guns, which sort of like changes how a lot of the weapons will develop here onwards, I guess, or at least that's what the inferring is. He causes him to flee, but there isn't really much resistance. Like, there's a little conversations here and there that something's not quite right here. head honcho, well, new head honcho guy, ghoul, cousin, whatever, is guessing where the clowns are going to be striking. And he talks about Formation A and Formation B, but he, like, drops in Formation C, and an investigator picks up on that, but doesn't challenge him on that. Because he talks about, like, A and B splintering off, and then this C group happens. That's a little frustrating, you know, just from, like, come on, say something. Yeah, you can see that something's not right here. Act upon it. Stop being such a fucking slave to the system. Like, have a backbone. Stand up for yourselves. But, again, fitting very in line with the rest of the writing of Tokyo Ghoul Re, when every fucking investigator is presented as being in it for themselves, but wanting to work up the ranks to be as strong and respected and have the most power and influence. Of course, a lot of them are going to stay fucking quiet, but the ones who point it out and presented as being a bit better than that, it's just, for fuck's sake, say something. But alongside the CCG stuff, the remnants of Aogi Tree and what basically any fucking ghoul that's mentioned in any of Tokyo Ghoul survives in one way or another, and they form together this essentially super group. The Kaneki is now in charge of, he calls the Goat, and he's wanting to strive for, like, peace between humans and ghouls, and he is going to lead the charge, and he's going to be doing this by taking on violence head on, which, you know, mirrors with what I was saying a little bit. But his angle comes at a little bit wrong, because it's in that, like, weird dreamscape thing where he's talking to that part of him that's Rise, who has a different art style in this, ever so slightly, just to show that she's matured a little bit, even though we don't actually see Rise as we know her from what we saw in Tokyo Ghoul, but again, it's all in a subconscious sort of thing. That Rise was actually part of this family, and she ran away, and the head of the CCG wants to marry her, have lots of babies, and, like, rebuild the bloodline and the image of things in his own name. He just sort of wants to take over with ghouls, I guess. Like, it's a very cookie cutter sort of thing. Annoyingly, I think there could have been a bit more with that. Like, his methods of achieving his goal is really interesting, but at the end of the day, he just wants to take over, and I think that's just a bit fucking boring. But the reveal that Rise is actually part of this family, she ran away, was interesting, but as I'm saying this and thinking about it and just saying the whole cookie cutter mold thing, feels a bit of a waste. Like, it kind of makes sense, you know, for how powerful she is, and then how powerful the Kaneki comes, and all the other fucking half-ghouls that comes from this experiment. It makes sense. I just wish there was a bit more that just happened with that, I guess, now that I'm thinking about it. Like, it was a bit of a wet fart of things, I guess. See, one of the joys of doing things ad-lib like this is that emotions can come from, like, very sudden places. But going back to, like, this super group, it's very interesting seeing all these ghouls come together, plus all the ghouls that Kaneki released from Cochlea, which has got me excited. Like, I thought, oh shit, there's going to be a real big fucking fight at the end of it. Like, it's all the most dangerous ghouls in Tokyo. Whatever's left of Aogi Tree, which is Toka's brother, the rabbit, the black owl, like, he is seemingly fucking chill about everything now. He seems to have calmed down quite a lot, but he's quite happy working with his sister now and Kaneki because of the whole fucking ghoul supremacy sort of thing. But he's chilled the fuck out, which I like. He sort of takes a bit of a back burner in this story. I did hope there would be a bit more of a development here. It's something that I've noticed a lot with this, now I'm thinking about it, that a lot of the ghouls don't have too much of a development, and it would have been nice to see a lot of them, like, step up a little bit more. And Jason's brother feels a bit more of a fleshed out character here. Like, again, dealing with his trauma of his brother being killed off through Kaneki, although it wasn't Kaneki. Not that they know that, it was actually Juzo. Actually, he would know that, surely. Kaneki would know that he didn't kill Kaneki. It would have been Juzo who would have finished him off at some point. Little continuity error, I guess, unless I missed something, but Kaneki doesn't share that anything, but he chills out, and him not being able to speak and read properly, like using, say, like getting some wrong words in the wrong places or whatever, is put into a bit more context because Toka's brother goes deep underground on the 24th ward, which is where all these ghouls end up hiding, which happened shortly after the genocidal leader is, like, wiping out ghouls. Like 80%, 90% of ghouls are gone, and deep underground, like, you've got these ghouls who don't speak English, well, Japanese, I guess, again, reading English translation, they don't speak Japanese, they have a very clear ghoul dialect, but they don't call themselves ghouls, they call themselves human. which is interesting. And they have this whole myth about this dragon that like toppled under this toppled the city, and they're waiting for the dragon to return, sort of thing, which does pay off a little bit. But it's very interesting just to see the culture of ghouls like this. I just thought that was really interesting. I would have liked to have seen a bit more of that, just because I just really fond of the fucking world building, the setting of the characters, and just they don't play too much of a role in this other than to reveal some of the plot. And also it is actually Iota at the end who like has to take Kaneki down for plot reasons to remove the whole fucking embryo sac and then kill off other version of Risei. So it's nice to see that the two of them are working together. But I just want to see more. I just want to see more of the Tokyo Ghoul world. And I am aware that there are like some spin-off novels, or there might be manga, I'm not entirely too sure, that I might have to get my hands on and read. So if that's something of interest to you, do let me know down in the comments below. I mean, Holly's pretty eager to start reading it right now. And it's with these bits of the ghouls, at first like this like overground, like abandoned place. We don't know where it is, but it's abandoned. That's where they're all hiding before they all were moved underground. That we have like the conversations with Mad and Amon, because it's actually this group of ghouls that have taken her in, because it's what Kaneki would have wanted. But of course, Mad was betrayed by Kaneki because of everything that's going on. She's was betrayed by Amon because he just fucked off for a few years and like didn't fucking speak to her. But there's a real touching and almost frightening, but yet sadly understandable exchange between her and Tuka. Because, just as a little side distraction, Tuka is also very happy that Kaneki's got his memories back. Those two are very much together now at this point. But the bit I'm talking about is like Tako and Mado go on a bit of a walk, because Mado feels a bit better, just up and about, moving about. And Tako just wanting to show her, you know, that not all ghouls are bad. And like just shows of all these kids playing about. They reveal to each other as like, Tuka's the one that killed her father. Mado's father was the one that killed Himone's parents, and Himone and Mado actually exchanged this really touching hug at the end. And she doesn't hate Mado for it, and Mado doesn't really hate her as much. And she feels very confused and conflicted because, you know, she's seen that these ghouls can be nice. She can see all these kids, you know. She feels confused that nobody hates her for the things that she's done. And she says, who do I have left to hate? Or who do I hate? Because she's seen the corruption of the CCG at this point. She's seen the kindful nature of ghouls. Like, her entire life has been working towards committing a genocide. You know, just fighting and protecting people. And she was there to protect and fight against her father. And the ghouls, whatever, who killed her father don't hate her. There isn't any animosity there, and she's just feeling so confused. And whilst the line of who do I hate is fucking frightening, just showing that it's a huge conflict of character, but I feel for her, because as I said, like that's the life that she has known. Like, what do I do now? I protected a ghoul I shouldn't have done, but you know, it's just, again, motions are messy fucking things, and it all just comes to the fact that all these different elements, they're just people with feelings, they're sentient, they know things, they just want to fucking survive, and it just works best, and we just all come together, that lovey-dovey hippie crap, as some people might put it. You know, it's more heart-wrenching than it is frightening, honestly, because you kind of get where she's coming from. And as I said, Tuka and Kaneki tie the knot. They actually have a marriage. The gourmet ghoul, he calms the fuck down. He doesn't so much want to eat Kaneki now, but he feels very loyal to him all the same. And there's a little bit here and there, but there's definitely a shift in his character. He organises big old wedding. It has a bit more of a tribal feel to it, so it's distinctly different from what humans do, which I like the fact that there is a clear, distinct difference with all of that. And it is nice that the two of them do hook up, because it's teased all the way fucking through this, but it's really through Ri where it like kicks off properly, where Tuka's a lot more honest with herself, and you could argue that some of her resentment towards Kaneki to begin with was because of her feelings towards him, the kindness that she's just wanting to look out and protect him, sort of thing. But it does like move at a rapid pace here, partly because they feel they're all going to die. I don't actually think the two of them ever say that they love each other. I think they might do once, but it's through their actions and their words that really show their love to each other. I mean, the marriage are one thing. Tuka is talking to Kaneki about, you know, whether he's a virgin or not, so clearly she wants to fucking get it on with him, but that kind of also implies that she doesn't have the best amount of experience herself, that she wants to but may not feel confident in leading, and they do have sex, and there is a sex scene in this manga. And while she initiates it because they're talking about and about to go in this big old battle or whatever, and she like just takes control of him, just like spins him over and pins him down, and like, we're doing this sort of thing. She lets him leave, and there's some shots where it's implied that this is her first time too, because it's a little painful for women or femme-presenting people, or people who have vaginas or whatever, because super tight and there might be a bit of blood, etc. and so forth, and it seems a bit more uncomfortable, but they do want to try and make it work. And Kaneki's not exactly confident either, because when he's asked is he a virgin, like, he's making coffee and he just ends up pouring it on the floor in a real fucking comedic way, because it's just so out of blue for him. And then when they're actually getting it on, he gets a little taken aback by seeing her tits and her bra, and like goes to squeeze them. Oh, they're so soft, and he takes her bra off, and like she's straddled on top of him, like chest shot upwards. No nipples. That's just unnecessarily censored, I think, here. It's just fucking naked. Might as well just draw the fucking nipples in, like hashtag free the nipple. It's a weird choice. I get it, but I've never got that level of censorship. Like, put nipples on tits, it's abhorrent, but nipples on guys, it's fine, because that like half naked shot of Kaneki in my original review of Tokyo Ghoul and other chest shots of him here, he's got nipples. That's alright there, but hey fucking ho, that's just the way of the world, unfortunately. And they're awkwardly trying to work it out, but they do want each other, they do clearly love each other, and it's just a really beautiful scene to see. And that might seem a little weird to some of you, like putting such a strong emotion for just some animated sex, and some people might think I'm a bit of a pervert with this, particularly with the fact it's Japan and the whole hentai scene and whatnot, and also just the whole conversation regarding like sex scenes as a whole. Whole industries out there that just thrive on nothing but sex, or having as minimal plot, or the plot is just so fucking ludicrous and basic, but they need something to instigate the sex in porn or whatever. And people argue that sex scenes in films and books and whatever aren't necessary, that they're just there to gain views, money, clicks, whatever. And I suppose there is an element of that works, because, you know, sex does sell. It's like one of the most fucking common tricks in marketing. And there are instances where I feel that there's sex in scenes that just, it's just there for the sake of it. I cannot remember the life of me the name of it now, but I was half watching a series with my mother, i.e. I was aware that it was on and my mother was watching it in the background, to do with these Irish mafia gangsters. I want to say it was in Boston or something, like a 10-year-old series at this point. The premise is that you got like one family, obviously mafia family, and one brother's really thick into it, and another one is like this Senate state representative. If you know what I'm talking about, do let me know in the comments below, and I'm honestly quite just too fucking lazy to search it up. And like in the latter series, there's some sex scenes in there, but there's some scenes later on where it just, like every other scene, it was just sex and there was tits and dicks about, and it just felt a bit, okay, let's see how much we can get away with, sort of thing. And yeah, you could argue it's to do like the display of power, I guess, of men over women, and just like not really caring and what those sort of things. And the Netflix series, I believe it's a Netflix anyway, it's on Netflix at the least, called Power, had moments of that in there for sure. It's just like, okay, like who is this for? Like, just do a fucking porno for fuck's sake. But there are moments, such as with here in Tokyo Ghoul, where it felt necessary, because it shows the development of character, it shows trust and feelings for each other. And as I started to say, they're both virgins, they're both trying to work things out and understand things. And I can talk very fondly, but I won't, of like seeing a pair of tits in the flesh for the first time, which, without going into too much details, it was with, well, not my partner anymore. We split up fairly yesterday as of the recording of this, and our relationship was very untypical. It was a a long distance relationship. We met up and we hooked up online, and we met up like a few months later, stayed at a hotel, and just whereas traditionally things would move at a steady pace, like all the things happened all at once. And I remember seeing it, just thinking really nervous, you know, because all these things are going to be happening shortly, and it's just there was no gradual build up, and it's that sort of thing that happens here. Like Kaneki hasn't done any of this shit before, and he's now about to go into a fight where he could fucking die, technically again. And just, you know, after just having sex, and he gets Tuka pregnant, so now he's not only fighting for ghouls and Tuka, but she's now pregnant. There's actually another thing that sets Tura off down the fucking down path towards the end when they have that big fight. Tuka refers to Kaneki as a husband, and Turo, fucking loses it. But I've talked a bit about that already, and it's just really beautiful to see, and it feels natural. It doesn't feel pornographic. You don't really see much other than censored titty. But it was very relatable. And at that point when I was reading it, when I was in a relationship, it just sort of made me realise just how much I had just longed and missed touch and being intimate. Not necessarily sex, although sex is great. But those very human emotions of being near and with somebody that you love and care for and trust. And it's very clear that these two do care and love each other. And there's a bit before then when he's keeping Tuka at a distance still because he doesn't want anything bad to happen to her. And like, she insists on being with him, you know, that we're feeling things for each other. I want to be with you. Please trust me. It's a lot more wholesome than that. And that does happen. And he's like allowing her to help him. And it's just really cool to see, and I just think that was a highlight for sure when that all happened. So the plot develops a lot more when there's a group of ghouls with Kenki that go out and find like meat and things for the rest of the 24th Ward ghouls to feed upon, with all this different stuff with Clown and the CCG going on. The leader escapes through a fucking window, survives because of course he does, because plot armor and what have you. But this is a trap. Well, part of the plan's been missing because he escapes all this and he goes with these all kid ghouls to invade the 24th Ward, and they find them because the group takes in a ghoul kid who they then realise is in actual fact one of the half-ghoul spies, because somebody catches him. Oh, it's the gourmet. He catches him like trying to put like a disk drive in a USB stick into like the computer, imprisons him, like demands to see Kaneki. He's a bit fucking cray. But this was all a distraction because he's got like a tracker embedded in his fucking tongue, which is used to bring the fucking CCG to them. And literally the best of the fucking best are down there to completely wipe these ghouls out. The leader and all these other half-ghoul kids. Zuzo's group, and Zuzo is down there, who I haven't talked a lot here, because Zuzo doesn't really appear all that much, other than the fact that he knows that their leader lied about Kaneki's execution, which is how the kids were introduced, weirdly enough. But Zuzo doesn't retaliate or do anything about this either, which is interesting and disappointing. One thing I forgot to mention is that when Yuri and the other half-ghoul investigators rebel, you have the big tittied sleepy one. Sorry for the descriptor, but I do not remember her name. She's got the fucking longest name out of anybody there. It's like Hebrew Yisha or something like that. She actually says, I'm gonna fight with you. I don't want to be a fucking terrorist. Like, I don't know how fucking more political you can get with that, but the CCG are fucking terrorists all the way through this. And especially at this point, there's no fucking denying that that's what they're doing. You could argue that prior to that, they'll just sort of keeping the peace and just like hunting down the most extreme ones, so there was some semblance of balance there, and just people, you know, abusing their power. And also, again, they're still, you know, committing genocide. So I'm not trying to give them too much excuses, but I've already talked about the fine balance between and the emotional turmoil from both sides, and both sides being empathetic. But it's just really pleasant to see that somebody is just calling them a fucking terrorists. So you have Zuzo's squad, the leader, and all these half-ghoul ghouls coming down there to basically wipe out the whole fucking lot. A lot of them can fight, but most of them can't, and then they try and flee, and some are killed off. We obviously don't see that, but it's very fucking clear that that's what's happening. And Kaneki realises on this scavenger hunt, essentially, what's going on, as he just started talking things from himself. And in classic Kaneki fashion, he goes back by himself thinking he can save everybody, and he does a fine job like wiping up investigators and whatnot, and he bulks up again with a similar but another form. He has so many fucking forms in this manga, it's difficult to keep track of his power level. And he's about to take on Zuzo and his assistant, and those two like bulk up in like this sort of like full armor Kenkis that we've seen beforehand, and they're only given to the best of the best. And Zuzo, as I've mentioned, is being set up to being like the replacement to Ariyama because they excelled to the pace that Ariyama did. They're undefeated, etc. and so forth. And there's this one panel here that shows that these two like in their full suits. Another one, Kaneki said, "I've got everyone to prepare for," etc. and so forth. You turn the page, and then you see Kaneki as this nugget, essentially. He's been defeated. No arms, no legs, he's on death's door. And I was like, I was so fucking shocked by this. This is one of those moments, like one of those page turner moments where, what the fuck? And I was like, that can't be right. I was flicking through the pages to see if I missed the page numbers, if pages were missing, and I was physically counting the pages at one point. It's like, holy shit, you are not going to show this fight? That Shuzo and this dude completely decimates them. Like, even the fight with Ariyama didn't reduce Kaneki to such a state. Like, okay, he had his eyes fucking gouged out, which is bad and all, he was kidnapped, but holy fuck. That powerful fucking shit. And then you turn through the pages and like the leader's mocking him, it's like, you've lost. And it really felt like a fucking video game, like, you got the bad ending. There's even a page where you turn over and it says, game over. Kaneki can't fucking realise it. It's like he lost, what happened sort of thing. He's all losing himself. He has another one of these conversations within himself, with all his different fucking personalities. The kid that's traumatised, human Kaneki, but still ignoring that he's a ghoul, investigator Kaneki, colder Kaneki, the mad fucking Kaneki, who his other forms don't refer to by his name, like Prisoner 2401, like 241 or whatever. Sorry, Prisoner 240. Numbers are hard. You're rambling, your opinion doesn't matter, which is so fucking cold. And then of course the mad one who like was tortured in the chair. They're all talking to each other, and he realises that again he's still trying to protect one. He's still being an idiot, running back and protecting himself. And I'm going to talk more about that other like mind palace thing, for lack of a better phrase, with Risei. Because they're sort of connected, because that comes up in conversation, and he realises it, that he wasn't doing it to protect everyone, that he was doing it because he wanted to be acknowledged, like to be seen, to feel appreciated, which kind of makes him feel a bit dictatorish, and he kind of acknowledges that, like this version of Risei has talked to him, that makes you sound like a dictator, like even if it makes you a dictator, like, yeah, I'll do whatever's necessary. He sort of realises that he's just doing it to be acknowledged, and he's confronting his traumas, and that's literally the only fucking way he's able to defeat the dude, because he finally fucking realises that he's not perfect, and all the stuff of him like calling himself a coward and like protecting him, it was all light, it was all self-servicing, but he does ultimately want peace between ghouls and humans, and it's just, again, really understandable, because didn't feel that his mum loved him properly. His aunt certainly didn't. When he was at that phase when he was ignoring his ghoul side, he didn't feel appreciated. He wasn't really appreciated in the investigators. Like, at no point in his fucking life has he felt appreciated, other than with his friend Hideo, whose face he fucking ate off and died. Only he didn't. He survived. He only got his lower jaw eaten off. And when that was revealed, on my page of notes here, I have literally wrote in capital letters, Hide is alive, and then just filled the rest of that line out with question marks. Like, fuck. And he sort of helps with some of the plan investigation stuff. And it's just, yeah, wow. Kind of makes a lot of what Kaneki went through pointless, I guess, because you think that he'd lost it and ate his best friend, and he's dealing with the trauma of that. Did kind of eat his face, so that is all traumatic all the same, but it kind of undermines a little bit of that character growth, but at the same time, it's nice, you know, that they're able to, like, reconcile, and Hede just doesn't have any fucking bad feelings, and it also makes sense that he sacrificed a bit of himself so that he was able to face Ariyama, which obviously didn't go the way that they intended it to, but it's all part of the plot after all. So you might be thinking at this point, well, how the fuck does little nugget Kaneki get out of this? Does he die and everyone's got to pick up the pieces for him? Well, no, I've already alluded there's like some weird fucking embryo thing that happens. Because what Kaneki does is that he's going to keep moving forward like a centipede. And then he starts eating the kids. And I think he bites like the lead investigator person as well, but he's basically just munching down all these fucking different kids. Like, the leader sends all the investigators off to do the rest of their shit, leaving him all these different kids, which is all part of their plan because they're all ghouls and he's eating all these different kids. He gains his power back, he takes out all these different kids, and he's eating more ghouls than any other ghoul has eaten, which then develops into the last stretch of the manga, which honestly felt so fucking JRPG at this point, or it's just fucking whack. Which is where the horror becomes a bit more eldritch in the sense, because this is the same volume where Hideo is revealed to being alive, and again, the only notes I wrote for this was, Hideo is alive, and what the fuck? Because it begins off with this very normal scene, like people living out their lives, there's this big old building, people going about their business. I thought, okay, why are we seeing this? It's like, it's just a weird time jump. You see like this 2-page shot of these people in this windows doing something, you turn the page, and then you get this shot. Now I've seen this image before, but I didn't realise it was Tokyo Ghoul, and I thought, what the fuck? Hence my notes of, what the fuck? That is Kaneki, who then becomes the aforementioned dragon, awaking from a slumber, who looks more like a fucking kaiju centipede. Literally, this gargantuan thing just storming through Tokyo and just crushing people, killing lives, and just like these little bits of him all over the place that start spawning these really horrible monsters that in the epilogue still persist even though so many years have passed. Like, obviously they managed to destroy it, but the rate it's able to decay is going to take years. I think, like, the scientist woman actually says it's going to take centuries for all of this to break down properly, which is so fucking bonkers to think about, that now this is the new common enemy threat sort of thing. But this is all being part of this plot thing that the leader is wanting to turn more people into ghouls. Because this kaiju centipede, which is what I'm just going to call it, or the dragon, I guess, would be easier, is giving off these pheromones that is turning people into ghouls, and they're having to force to be eat upon flesh. Like, I don't really know what the end game is, like, what was the intention of all of this, but the leader has realised that they have fucked up, and they fucking flee underground to find, like, the main body of this kaiju, to find this version of Rise take away and then become, what, the new king and queen, I guess, of this new empire. I don't really know what the end goal was. He realises he's fucked up and he just, like, fucks off and flees, and he's a bit too much out of control. And it's really Kaneki that's the only one that goes down there, because it's literally making everyone feel nauseous. With the ghouls, it's causing, like, it causes one of the characters who are fighting on top of the kaiju to find Kenji, because they realise they need to get Kenji out of this, because they're not really one of the same. And they realise, well, Toko realises that she gave him the ring I think her parents had, and she realised, okay, we could use a metal detector to try and locate where the body is, and then pull him out. Really fucking simple idea. Turns out it works, fortunately. But it's a real simple thing, and there's this big old fight with the investigators and Tuco that I've talked about already, and it causes one of the ghouls, the half ghouls rather, to produce like a fucking thing from her face. We see an element of this before in the first issue of Tokyo Ghoul, because it seemed a bit familiar. I didn't mention it then because it didn't seem all that important, other than just being like a weird side plot thing. So Kaneki's freed again. He looks all fucking different. He has another fucking form when he has the fight with the leader guy, who again completely fucking thrashes, and again confronts his trauma via Rise. It's also through this that we see the fight with the clowns and Amon, or the leader, and we also see a bit of resolution between Yomo and the mask making ghoul, because he's part of the clan. He's a villain in this, which I feel bad about, because I actually really like the character, but it's kind of hinted a bit that he's all in it for the chaos and things, but so I like that. I just wish he wasn't a bad guy just because I liked him, and it just felt bad. I thought these two characters are going to go and kill each other. They do fight each other because Yomo is like wanting to protect Toko, because it's revealed that he is Toko's and Ayoto's uncle, which I think I've mentioned previously, but if I haven't, I mention it now. That's kind of a big reveal. I don't think the two siblings know that he's the uncle. He's just notably older. He's a bit of a violent one, and he meets the mask-making ghoul as a friend. But it's kind of sad that these two are fighting each other. Like these basically brothers going at it sort of thing. They're best buddies, like real bro energy that these two have. Yomu's the one that wins, but he doesn't kill him. He doesn't kill his mate. And there's a bit of a homage to a thing that they do as their kids. Like he helps him after having to carry him through because he's really injured. But the thing that's really interesting about Yamu is that we don't actually see him turn or use his Keneki, not Keneki, sorry, like his old like ghoul powers at all. Except here, where he just throws a bolt of fucking lightning at the guy and impales him through like this tower spire, sort of like an antenna sort of thing. So Yomo's pretty fucking powerful. We see some of the extent of his power. We don't see any of the other fucking ghouls fire energy at them. Like we see it with Ariyama with his Quinke, like he's able to fire like these energy, like this like pronged weapon sort of thing, just to show that again how powerful he is. We don't see it from ghouls. So obviously there are ghouls out there who are able to do this sort of thing, but we see it with Yomo, which is frightening to think about. But he still has that humanity and compassion. Like, this isn't you. I'm not going to kill you. Like, cut out of it sort of thing, which is rather wholesome. And he's still with the clowns, or rather he's still with his little circle of friends who associate with the clowns are the sort of antagonistic adjacent sort of thing. But it's nice that not all the resolutions are left with death. It's a little comforting and just seeing some fucking compassion at play. And regarding returning ghoul characters, we also see the leaders of the Black Dobermans, or Dobers I think they're called, and the Apes return. You know, that woman and guy from the cafe that we saw very briefly at the end of the manga. The leaders of these two large groups that, you know, are this big threat for the CCG for some time. Believed to have been wiped out. I thought the two of those two are dead, or I think they survived. I don't quite remember, but I wasn't expecting to see them again. They return as they briefly wanting to work with Kaneki, but they get kidnapped by the CCG, and then these elite CCG, you know, the top hat, the V, the 5 or whatever, capture them, and they use them as Quinkes, they're essentially brainwashing them. Which the CCG made note of. I can't remember the name that's given here, but it's like it was trialed in Germany or whatever. Germany's mentioned quite a lot in this fucking manga. And it was just deemed too unethical, too dangerous, whatever. But it was basically this is a bad thing, and they're doing it here, having ghouls fight ghouls in such a fashion, and it's real messed up. I mean, fortunately, the two leaders survive and they have their memories intact and everything, which is varying levels of impressive. But it just goes to show that, and also with the bit with Yomo and Ren, that's the mask maker's name, that despite how late these are, like I believe that the Dobermans, yes, and I think that fight with Ren and Yomo there happened in the last issue of the manga. How they're willing to develop and introduce new ideas so early on, or that thing with Yomo, fucking powerful ghoul we have yet to see. Not like fucking kaiju level, sure, but probably definitely up there, because we don't see any other fucking ghoul like fire energy beams at all. And also this element with the CCG, like other little Quinkes and things that they use, and it just makes you question just what other methods do they have at their disposal that we just don't get to see or hear about. What boundaries of ethics do they want to cross? I mean, for fuck's sake, we have half ghoul investigators in the plenty by the end of it. I mean, most of the humans it happens to with consent, and one of them does become a ghoul. But do you reckon those kids were? But do you reckon those kids had consent? Or whether they just grown in a fucking test tube sort of thing? Like, yeah, it's rocking real messed up shit. But of course, you know, the ghouls save the day. The leader is killed off by Kaneki. Kaneki is able to kill like the embryonic version of Risei. The fifth are defeated. Everybody's plot lines and hooks are just correlated in a nice little bow. Zuzo, as I was correct, becomes the Ariyama because the CCG forms like this Tokyo industry thing. I can't remember the name they give it, where you have ghouls working there. The gourmet ghoul, he's putting a lot of his finances into this and like combining his little company, like royal family, whatever, the Rosewoods, into this. You have the ghoul hunters who are still doing it. The group's not together. Like Tora goes off to do something, but he's still hunting ghouls. I don't remember exactly what everyone's doing. Like, as I said, this has got a huge fucking cast, and I do not remember every single fucking person. Juzo, as I started to say, has become the Aramana. They're considered like the best of the fucking bunch, like top fucking rank. So, watch out, world. But Zuzo also gets the happy ever after because their father figure, who was the instructor for Amon, wakes up from his fucking coma, which might seem a bit idealistic, but it's nice that they get their happiness. And they just like drop, then they find out the news, they just drop to their knees and they just fucking cry. Because you don't see them be that open with their emotions. They're clearly fucking damaged goods. Like, they've gone through some fucking shit, and this one guy is like the only person who has treated Shuzo like a fucking human being with emotions and feelings. It's just so hot. I love Zuzo. I love these characters, but it's just so great that Juzo gets his happily ever after. If I wanted anyone to have to feel happy and at peace, it was fucking Juzo. Like, they fucking deserve it, even though they're like a twisted motherfucker who has a fucking rise out of killing people. It's understandable because the fucking shit that Zuzo's gone through, from being raised from one group of murderers to being raised by another group of fucking murderers and just being treated like a source of entertainment and a tool. Zuzo is a bit better off with the CG. I talked about all of this before in the backstory and stuff, but it's great to see that everybody has their happily ever after, that there's more equality between ghouls and humans, because I fucking forgot to mention the whole fucking kaiju thing. Like, it's Hideo and somebody else that managed to convince the CCG that the ghouls should be working together with the fucking CCG. It's literally the only way that they can help out with this. Not through violence, but through strong motivational pieces. There's been lots of violence, there's been a lot of violence that's got to that point, but they had that fucking conversation. Bit of turmoil with the half-ghoul stuff on the fucking kaiju, I guess, but there is peace. The ghouls are working with humans now and the investigators. They put aside their differences. They go and hunt down the ghouls that are still fucking about. They're hunting down these monsters that are popping out of this dragon kaiju thing. And Kaneki and Tuka have their child, who has their little profile at the end of this, because something I haven't mentioned that's similar with the Tokyo Ghoul, they all have their like profile bios, but rather than being at the front of the manga, to the back. Also, there aren't as many spoilers. And their child is mentioned at the end of volume 16. They are a half ghoul and they can eat normal food. Which hit me a lot harder than I thought it was, because it's such a strong part of the story, both from Kaneki and Tuka. Like, their different paths, as I talked about in my original review. Hello, Future Lore here. I'm very tired, as you might have picked up from the fucking video that you've just watched, or in the middle of watching. I don't know where I'm going to be putting this edit, but it needs to go somewhere. But I'm using my tiredness as an excuse to say that I completely forgot to tell you what the fuck happened to Kano. You know, the fucking human scientist that caused all this fuckery. Well, he's confronted by what the half-ghoul girl, and the one that remains, because remember, the one absorbed her sister, who has apparently the most beef with Kano. She's part of the whole goat thing, and she's wanting to go and, you know, take him out. They have a bit of a chat. He feels he's done what he's going to do. Mission accomplished. He blows his brains out because he's a fucking pussy. Which is super fucking frustrating that she didn't get the send-off that she wanted. But it's understanding that a fucking low-life piece of shit like him would send himself off like that. It's fitting, but so bad. I feel sad for that character as well, that she couldn't get the peace that she wanted. And I think at the end that she becomes one of the ones that that's it, she goes around the world hunting ghouls, and gains a name of herself that way around. So the quality between ghouls and humans is a worldwide thing now,
or maybe it's something specific to Japan. I don't know. I think from the writing is that this whole theme in Tokyo has brought the whole world together on some semblance of unity. But yeah, fucking pussy Kano bitch right here.
I didn't know anything about Tokyo Ghoul coming, well, Tokyo Ghoul Re, I should say, coming into this, other than it was the sequel. Well, that's about it, really. And the anime season 3 uses Tokyo Ghoul Re. And I heard like some people say that the writing for Tokyo Ghoul is really good, but it's really from Tokyo Ghoul Re, it really lifts and it really becomes its own. Which I agree, like the writing is more mature, it's not as raw as Tokyo Ghoul. Like this is clearly the author like getting their emotions and like their first idea, the idea that made them great and famous and all the rest of it. But they've had some time to cook with this, and this really does become a much finer series than its predecessor, and I think in many ways it surpasses the original Tokyo Ghoul. And just the whole Tokyo Ghoul run as a whole has been one emotional roller coaster, as I've been reading this through some very unpleasant parts of my life. I mentioned the breakup from earlier on. The beginning of my Tokyo Ghoul review had a very depressing start, which I still fucking stand by as an appropriate opening for the general theme and vibe that people have with Tokyo Ghoul as a whole. That it's like this super edgy series that's like, I mean, it makes fun of itself with some of the emo stuff. Like, the author is fucking aware of it, and he like pokes and makes fun of it with like little jokey comic strips that happened in between the manga that I didn't pay too much attention to just because I wasn't too interested in it. But yeah, I fucking love Tokyo Ghoul, and I felt really empty and hollow when I finished reading it because now, okay, what the fuck do I do with my life? Like, it sort of hit me that much. It's made me feel seen. It's similar with Tokyo Ghoul. It's made me feel seen, and it's been very appropriate and hopeful in a realistic sort of way. Like, oh, we all just come to hand together and be peaceful. Like it's not like that. It shows that you do need to fucking be active with your change and your activism and do things, and to make a proper change in the world, there is going to be some bloodshed. There's going to be some crosswords, and also applies to confronting and dealing with trauma, or basically anything that's different, which I do have to admit that is a little bit idealistic, because there are many people who for one reason or another can't do that. Like, people are going to feel trapped, who are going to be unable to do these things for one reason or another, and that's fine. But as a whole, you know, when confronting fascism, genocide and terrorism, and just trying to make the world a better place as a whole, you do need to be at the forefront of things. Like, you need to make the change happen, and dialogue isn't going to be peaceful. The art's fantastic, characters far fucking too many for me to keep a track of rather, but they all feel human. Yeah, I kind of like peppered my thoughts and opinions about this all the way through this, so this isn't really as a more contained summary as I would typically do. I'm so glad that I've spent so much money on this and just reading this, and I kind of wish I didn't binge it as quickly as I did, but I kind of say that with a lot of these things, but I just really enjoyed it, and I just couldn't fucking put the shit down. I absolutely love this series, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's not too long if I just go through it all again, just because I just loved it so much, which I don't typically do with books. But I feel this could be like a really... I think I found a new comfort read, a bit of comfort media. So before I get too fucking emotional and trauma dump you even more, I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions about Tokyo Ghoul Re and Tokyo Ghoul as a whole. What do you think about it? Good, bad, different? Let's start a Tokyo Ghoul related conversation down in the comments below. Also, I'd be more than happy to take on manga recommendations as well. The other Tokyo Ghoul books that I mentioned, what are they like? I'm aware there's a live action film, which I haven't seen. My impression, it's not very good. Is there anything like Tokyo Ghoul that I would read? be cautious with vampires, only because if I might have seen it already. I kind of like the Tokyo Ghoul being vampire adjacent, but if there's anything that's like Tokyo Ghoul that isn't clearly vampire, anyway, just give me your fucking recommendations. Like, ignore my waffling here. Like, I'd love to hear what you think I would enjoy and potentially read and check out on the channel. I do have a couple of things that are a little different to what I would typically cover, just because I just want to read them and give my thoughts about them. To give an idea, Metamorphosis. Google that one, you'll recognize that one specific image that's used in so many fucking thumbnails. Yeah, give me your thoughts and opinions about Tokyo Ghoul and the different manga that I should check out and other works of fiction and comics and all the rest of it. And yeah, I'll see you on the next upload, whatever that may well be for you. Until next time, farewell.